censorship through political campaign contributions, which is legalized bribery with regard to how they got put on the bench primarily, or sometimes even illegal bribes. With regard to lawyers, the legal profession is highly corrupt. I've been in it for 44 years. I can tell you about that. It's time that the American people take back their legal system, just like our founding fathers did on July 4th, 1776, when they declared independence, after King George III took our criminal justice system away from us and took it back to the court of St. James. And why did he do that? Why did they do that? Because the king was issuing one edict, that is one executive order after another, having his judges, his yes men, they didn't have women in those days, on the bench, rubber stamp what was going on. It's very important for the American people to understand that we hold our fate in our own hands. And we also have the ability to try to seek a conviction, to sentence, and to mete out that sentence with citizens' arrest. We will never use violence. We will never use force. But in my book, It Takes a Revolution, I go through the legal history of citizens' arrest. Even in the most leftist of all states in this country, California, there's a statute which says that if you see somebody committing a felony or know of a felony, a citizen has the right to arrest that person and to turn them over to authorities. Of course, the catch is, what will the authorities then do? But if the people rise up and make it clear, as Jefferson said, that when the people fear the government, there's tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there's liberty. Take as an example, Poland, where millions and millions of people went into the streets, didn't fire a shot. The Soviet Union was forced to leave, and Poland was freed from communism. Of course, as Jefferson predicted, over time, corruption creeps into any governmental system. And it was another founding father who was by the name of John Adams, who said that without ethics, morality, and religion, doesn't matter how many times you change your rulers or forms of government, you will not have a lasting liberty. Well, in Poland, it crept back into the system, of course, and they've got to rid themselves because the communists are now back in control, as they are in Russia and every place else. And now, of course, we know what's going on in this country. So I call upon you, grand jurors, who are assembled here today. Unless you want to be identified, we're not going to identify you for security reasons, because there are people out there these days that want to harm those who stand up to the rule of law and stand up to what's right under the laws of nature and nature's God. But we will deliberate. And I urge you, I'm going to read you the jury instructions that we have after I finish this introduction. I want you to put your politics aside at the door. We're doing this, of course, through Zoom. You'll be able to watch it again and see what evidence and information was presented. So this is not a be-all and end-all, this presentation here today in front of our citizens' grand juries. But we will be meeting more than once. We're just beginning this process today. We will be meeting every Thursday for the foreseeable future. We are starting with as the prosecutor of the citizens' grand jury, someone who was formerly a prosecutor with the U.S. Department of Justice when it was still the Department of Justice, as opposed to today, where it's become the Department of Injustice. I say that sadly. But we will be meeting, and we will be seeking indictments of all those that need be held to account. And we will do it in a rational, proper way without politics. We are starting to seek the indictment of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden, who are alleged to have participated in a massive bribery scheme with money from not just communist China, but Ukraine and other places. We will also talk about Joe Biden's failure to adhere to our law, violation of the Constitution, reckless endangerment with allowing immigrants, illegal aliens to flow across our border, infected with COVID-19 variants that we don't even know if the vaccines, should they work at all for anything, and no one truly knows that yet. will cover these variants. And with regard to sedition, because this is treasonous to allow these people to come into the country unchecked. They're already in our hinterland. They've been sent to various cities already, drug dealers, criminals, and others. Not all the people are that way. Some of them are just ordinary people. But there are a lot of drug dealers, criminals already. 11 Iranians were caught trying to cross the border. One can wonder what their real intentions were. We've already seen some terrorism in the recent past. We will start with that, and we will continue. This will be the beginning of seeking those indictments for those alleged criminal acts. And we will then move on to those who have not been held accountable as well. Mitch McConnell has taken money illegally from the communist Chinese through his family, through his wife, Elaine Chao. We will then put him in front of the citizens' grand jury. We are nonpartisan. It has nothing to do with being Democrat or Republican. Those who break the law must be held accountable by we the people, because the establishments of both political parties protect each other. Then we'll move on to what even the Trump Justice Department failed to address, thanks to the fact that we had two political hacks as Attorney General, Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr, who did nothing. You see, in Washington, D.C., in particular, it's the National Hack League, so to speak. You've got the American Conference and the National Conference. The Democrats and Republicans protect each other. No one at the high level is ever held accountable. Only lower level people occasionally are burned at the stake. And I've been saying that for many, many years, and I talk about that in my book. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start this process today. I'm now going to give these jury instructions to all of you, and you must stay neutral. You must listen carefully. If for any reason, you don't feel well today or whatever, you can go back and review it. What we've done, it'll be up at crowdsourcethetruth.com, at freedomwatchusa.org. And I urge you, by the way, to always tune in to Crowdsource the Truth, because they allow me and others to tell the truth, as well as Freedom Watch USA and Radio America, where I have a radio show each week, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, and podcasts every day. I say this because the American people are not getting the truth. And that's why the book, which I wrote, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, has the subtitle, Forget About Fox News, forget about MSNBC, forget about CNN. They're a profit-driven motive. They don't let you tell what's true. People that actually do things generally don't go on there. It's just a bunch of pundits who are making money for the network and making money for themselves. This is a project of the American people. We're doing it because we believe in and love this country. Now, Jason, let's go to the jury instructions. I want you people to read them. If you can enlarge that, Jason, because it's very hard for me to read it.
I can read them if that's easier for you, Larry. Sure. Members of the Citizens Grand Jury, now it is time for you to be instructed about the law you must follow in deciding this case. Larry will start by explaining your duties and the general rules that apply in every criminal case. Unlike the jury at trial, the grand jury does not determine guilt or innocence, but only whether there is probable cause to believe that a crime was committed and that a specific person or persons committed it. If the grand jury finds that probable cause exists against a person suspected of having committed the crime, then it will return a written statement of the charges called an indictment. After that, the person will go to trial. That trial will usually be held before a petite jury. Next, we'll explain how the elements of each of the crimes that the putative defendants, hereafter defendants, Joe, Hunter, and James Biden, are investigated for committing. You may think of the elements of the crime as the essential ingredients or important parts of the proof of the crimes. Then we will explain some rules that you must use in evaluating particular testimony and evidence. And last, we will explain the rules that you must follow during your deliberations and the possible verdicts that you may return. please listen very carefully to everything that is explained. Jurors' duties. You have two main duties as jurors. The first one is to decide what the facts are from the information that you saw and heard here today. Deciding what the facts are is your job, not mine, not Larry's. Nothing we say or do during this trial is meant to influence your decision about the facts in any way. Your second job is to take the law that we give you, applying it to the facts, and decide if the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has proved that there is probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed and that the specific accused persons might have committed the crime, justifying sending the case to trial. It is our job to instruct you about the law, and you are bound by the oath you took at the beginning of the trial to follow the instructions you're given, even if you personally disagree with one or more of those instructions. This includes the instructions that we give you, and these instructions. All the instructions are important, and you should consider them as a whole. Do your jobs fairly. Do not let any bias, sympathy, or prejudice that you may feel for or against either side influence your decision in any way. The burden of proof, probable cause. The indictment is a formal way that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor tells the defendants and prosecutors what crimes the defendant is accused of committing. The grand jury normally hears only that information presented by the prosecutor, which tends to show the commission of a crime. The grand jury must determine from this information, and usually without hearing evidence for the defense, whether the person being investigated by the grand jury should be tried for a serious crime, which may be punished by imprisonment for more than 1 year. As a general rule, no one can be prosecuted for a serious crime unless the grand jury decides that the information it has heard so requires. In this way, the grand jury operates both as a sword, authorizing the prosecution of suspected criminals, and also as a shield, protecting citizens from unwarranted or inappropriate prosecutions. This means that no defendant has any obligation to present any evidence at all, or to prove to you in any way that he is innocent. It is up to the citizen's grand jury prosecutor to show that defendant may have committed the crimes charged, and this burden stays on the citizen's grand jury prosecutor from start to finish. The citizen's grand jury prosecutor must provide probable cause about every element, that is, every important part of the crime. In addition, the law does not require that every particular fact mentioned be proved. Rather, the law requires that enough facts be shown to convince you that there is probable cause that the crime was committed and that the defendant committed it. Information defined. You must make your decision based only on the evidence that you saw and heard here. The evidence in this case includes only what the witnesses said while they were testifying, or the documents, research, and exhibits that will be provided. Any facts that we've told you to simply assume had been shown by probable cause. Nothing else is relevant. The citizen's grand jury prosecutor's statements and arguments are not evidence. His questions and objections are not evidence. Comments and questions are not evidence. Do not speculate about what some witness might have said or what some exhibit might have shown. Make your decision based only on the information provided to you as it has been defined here and nothing else. Consideration of information. You should only use your common sense in weighing the information. Consider it in light of your everyday experience with people and events, and give it whatever weight you believe it deserves. If your experience tells you that certain information reasonably leads to a conclusion, you are free to reach that conclusion. Bringing real-world experience into the process is one of the reasons for a jury. Direct and circumstantial evidence. Now, we've already discussed the terms direct information and circumstantial information. Direct information is simply like the testimony of any eyewitness, which, if you believe it, directly proves a fact. If a witness testified that he saw someone walking across a field and you believed him, that would be direct information that such a thing had happened. Circumstantial information is simply a collection of circumstances that indirectly proves a fact. If a witness said that he saw fresh footprints in newly fallen snow, that would be circumstantial information from which you could conclude that someone had recently been walking there. Legally, there is no difference between direct and circumstantial information. The law does not say that one is necessarily any better information than the other. You should consider all the information, both direct and circumstantial, and give it whatever weight you believe it deserves. Credibility of witnesses, documents, reports, and exhibits. Part of your job as jurors is to decide how believable was each witness, document, report, exhibit, etc. This is your job, not ours. It is up to you to decide if a witness' testimony was believable and how much weight you think it deserves. You are free to believe everything that a witness said, or only part of it, or you can believe none of it at all, even if the witness has not been contradicted. But you should, of course, act reasonably and carefully in making these decisions. Let me suggest some things for you to consider in evaluating each witness's testimony. A. Ask yourself if the witness was able to clearly see or hear the events. Sometimes even an honest witness may not have been able to clearly see or hear what was happening and may make a mistake. B. Ask yourself how good the witness's memory seemed to be. Did the witness seem able to accurately remember what happened? C. Ask yourself if there was anything else that may have interfered with the witness's ability to perceive or remember the events. D. Ask yourself how the witness looked and acted while testifying. Did the witness seem honestly to be trying to tell you what happened, or did the witness seem to be evasive, confused, or even lying? E. Ask yourself if the witness had any relationship to either side of the case, or anything to gain or lose that might influence the witness's testimony. Ask yourself if the witness had any bias or prejudice or reason for testifying that might cause the witness to lie or to slant testimony in favor of one side or the other. F. Ask yourself if the witness testified inconsistently while on the witness stand, or if the witness said or did anything off the stand that is not consistent with what the witness said while testifying. If you think that the witness was inconsistent, ask yourself if this makes the witness's testimony less believable. Sometimes it may, other times it may not. For example, you might consider whether the inconsistency was understandable or explainable. You might also ask yourself if it seemed like an insignificant or common mistake, or if it seemed to indicate a deliberate attempt to mislead. Finally, ask yourself how believable the witness's testimony was in light of all the other information. Was the witness's testimony supported, or was it contradicted by other information that you found believable? If you think that a witness's testimony was contradicted by other information, keep in mind that people sometimes do forget things, and that even two honest people who witness the same event may not describe it exactly the same way. These are only some of the things that you may consider in deciding how believable or reliable each witness was. You may also consider other things that you think shed light on the witness's believability. Use your common sense and your everyday experience in dealing with other people, and then decide what testimony you believe and how much weight, how much significance you think it deserves. The number of witnesses. One more point about the witnesses. Some jurors wonder if the number of witnesses who testified on a particular point or on one side or the other makes any difference. It does not. Do not make any decisions based only on the number of witnesses who testified. What is more important is how believable the witnesses were and how much weight you think their testimony deserves. Concentrate on that, not the numbers. Elements of the offense. 1.
These are the offenses, Jason, let me just interrupt briefly, sure. That preliminarily, I, as your prosecutor, are going to seek you to indict Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden, which is Joe Biden's brother, about. However, as this case proceeds, we may add other counts, other alleged crimes, or we may take some of them off the table. We'll see how it proceeds, because this is a several-step process. At the end of your presentation, and I add, one of the things that Justice Scalia made clear is that what's put in front of a grand jury is not necessarily admissible evidence in court. It can be hearsay, it can be books, it can be videos, it can be writings. You can assume anything to be credible under these circumstances, doing it fairly. Because in the end, if you return a true bill of indictment, that's what it's called, these individuals will have an opportunity to defend themselves in a people's court. So you need simply to find probable cause. And as Justice Scalia said, I just read it to you, mere suspicion is enough to commence a grand jury proceeding. This is the basis. It stems from ancient England. It isn't part of our legal system as well. At the end of these deliberations, at the end of your hearing, the information and evidence, which doesn't need to be admissible, you will deliberate. You will elect a foreman. You will deliberate behind closed doors, as grand juries do, and you will decide whether to issue a true bill of indictment in whole or in part. So, and at the end of Jason reading the allegations that initially are being put in front of you in terms of the law we're using, the American established legal system, but there's also the law of nature and nature's God, as our founding fathers said. And even if it's not technically within the law as enacted by Congress, this can be considered. So we're going to leave this question open. In addition, I'm going to issue an oath that you'll do your jobs fairly and honestly at the end of Jason reading these preliminary alleged crimes. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Larry. The elements of the offense. Here's the introduction. That concludes the part of the instructions explaining your duties and the general rules that apply in every criminal case. In a moment, I will explain the significant elements of the crimes that the defendant is accused of committing. But before I do that, I want to emphasize that the defendants are under grand jury investigation for the particular crimes charged in the indictment. Your job is limited to deciding whether the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has approved each crime charged. Also keep in mind that whether anyone else should be prosecuted and convicted for this crime is not a proper matter for you to consider. The possible guilt of others is no defense to a criminal charge. Your job is to decide if the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown by probable cause that the defendants are guilty. Do not let the possible guilt of others influence your decision in any way. Count 1, 18 U.S.C. Section 201 C1b. Count 1 of the indictment charges the defendants, Joe, Hunter, and James Biden, with solicitation of or demand for a bribe by a government official, which is a violation of federal law under 18 U.S.C. Section 201 C1b. The prosecutor must only show that there is probable cause to believe that the defendants solicited or demanded something of value corruptly and with the intent to be influenced in connection with some business or transaction by the vice president. In order to indict the defendant of this offense, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor showed that each of the following 7 elements is supported by probable cause. 1. The individual soliciting a bribe is by or on behalf of a public official, which could include elected officials or even include relatively low-level federal government employees. 2. The public official and or his agents, such as Hunter and James Biden, charged with soliciting a bribe, requested or demanded something valuable in return for the public official doing an official act or withholding an official act for the benefit of the payer of the bribe. 3. A thing of value was requested, whether it's tangible, such as cash, or intangible, such as a promise of influence or official support. 4. The requested bribe is meant to influence some official act by the public official. 5. The public official seeking the bribe has the power to influence the official decisions or actions, acts to the benefit of the person asking for the bribe. 6. The party charged with bribery or soliciting bribery established some specific intended result of the bribe. 7. The prosecutor must prove that the defendants intended at least in part to be influenced by the payment of a bribe, but the prosecutor is not required to prove that the defendant or the United States of America by its vice president actually did take any particular action. To act corruptly means simply to act knowingly and intentionally with the purpose either of accomplishing an unlawful end or unlawful result, or of accomplishing some otherwise lawful end or lawful result influenced by the receipt of the thing of value. Corrupt acts are ordinarily motivated by a hope or expectation of either financial gain or other benefit to oneself, or some aid or profit to another. You must find the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all 7 of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendants of the charges under Count 1. Count 2, 48 CFR Section 3.101(2). Count 2 of the indictment charges the defendants with acceptance of a gratuity by government personnel, which is a violation of federal law under 48 CFR Section 101-2. In order to indict Joe, Hunter, and James Biden of this offense, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor proved that each of the following 6 elements is supported by probable cause. Element 1, the individual accepting a gratuity or bribe is by or on behalf of a government employee. 2, the government employee and or his agent solicited or accepted directly or indirectly any gratuity, gift, favor, entertainment, loan, or anything of monetary value. 3, the person paying the gratuity, A, has or is seeking to obtain government business and or favors with the employee's agency. B, conducts activities that are regulated by the employee's agency. Or C, has interests that may be substantially affected by the performance or non-performance of the employee's official duties. 4, the requested or accepted gratuity is meant to influence some official act by the public official. 5, the public official and or his agents seeking or accepting the bribe have the power to influence the official decision or acts to the benefit of the person paying gratuity. 6, the prosecutor is not required to show that defendant or the United States of America by its vice president actually did take any particular action. You must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all 6 of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendants of the charges under Count 2. Count 3, 18 U.S. Code, Section 1956. Count 3 of the indictment charges the defendants with money laundering, which is a violation of federal law under 18 U.S. Code Section 1956. Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1956A prohibits domestic money laundering transactions. Section 1956A1 and the international money laundering transactions under Section 1956A2. In order to indict Joe, Hunter, and James Biden of this offense under 18 U.S.C. 1956A1, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor showed that each of the following 6 elements is supported by probable cause. 1. Defendant and or his agents conducted or attempted to conduct a financial transaction which he knew or believed involved the funds where the financial proceeds derived from some unlawful activity. And 2, the financial transaction affected interstate or foreign commerce. And 3, the funds were in fact derived from the specific type of unlawful activity. And 4, the money must in fact be derived from unlawful activity among the types specified in the statute. And 5, defendant intended to hide the source of the funds, including any one of the following. A. Intent to promote the carrying on of unlawful activity, violation of Section 1956A1, big A, little 1. Or B. Intent to engage in tax evasion or tax fraud, violation of 1956A1, A2. Or C. Knowledge that the transaction was designed to conceal or disguise the nature, location, source, ownership, or control of proceeds of the unlawful activity, violation of Section 1956A1B1. Or D. Knowledge of the transaction was designed to avoid transaction reporting required under state or federal law, violation of 1956A1B2. 6. The actual source of the funds was from one of the specified forms of criminal activity identified by the statute. Types of criminal activity possibly relevant to this case include A. Bribery of a public official, or the misappropriation, theft, or embezzlement of public funds by or for the benefit of a public official, or B. Smuggling or export control violations, or C. An offense with respect to which the United States would be obligated by a multilateral treaty either to extradite the alleged offender or to submit the case for prosecution if the offender were found within the territory of the United States. Or D. Any act or acts constituting a continuing criminal enterprise defined in Section 408 of the Controlled Substances Act, 21 U.S.C. 848, or E. Concealment of assets, or F. Any felony, violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or G. Any felony violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or H. Any predicate act from the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Statute, 18 U.S.C. Section 1961, 1. Section 1956C, 7B, including the Hobbs Act prohibiting extortion for financial payment. Proceeds from crimes committed in another country, illegal under that country's laws, may constitute proceeds of unlawful activity for purposes of the money laundering statutes in the United States. The prosecutor need not show that Joe, Hunter, and James Biden knew which specific crime from which their proceeds were derived, only that defendants knew that the property was illegally derived in some way. You must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all 6 of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendants of the charges under Count 3. Count 4, 22 U.S. Code Section 612. Count 4 of the indictment charges the defendant with Foreign Agents Act Registration Act, which is a violation of federal law under 22 U.S. Code Section 612. In order to indict the defendant of this offense, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor proved that each of the following 5 elements is supported by probable cause. The Foreign Agent Registration Act requires that 1. No person shall act as an agent of a foreign principal. 2. Unless he has filed with the Attorney General a true and complete registration statement. Under sworn oath on the form prescribed by the Attorney General, including a comprehensive statement of the nature of the registrant's business, a complete list of the registrant's employees, and a statement of the nature of the work of each. The name and address of every foreign principal from which the registrant is acting, assuming or purporting to act or has agreed to act, the character of the business or other activities of every such foreign principal, and, if any such foreign principal be other than a natural person, a statement of the ownership and control of each, and the extent, if any, to which each such foreign principal is supervised, directed, owned, controlled, financed, or subsidized, in whole or in part, by any government of a foreign country or foreign political party, or by any other foreign principal, within 10 days, and then within 48 hours, file with the Attorney General 2 copies of any informational materials for or in the interests of such foreign principal, 1 in the form of prints, or 2 in the form which is reasonably adapted to being, or which he believes will be, or which he intends to be, disseminated or circulated among 2 or more persons. You must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all 5 of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendants Joe, Hunter, and James Biden of the charges under Count 4. Count 5. 18 U.S.C. Section 1346. Count 5 of the indictment charges the defendants with honest services fraud, which is a violation of federal law 18 U.S.C. Section 1346. In order to indict the defendant of this offense, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor showed that each of the following 8 elements is supported by probable cause. Honest services fraud is defined in Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 1346 and requires proof that the defendant himself or through his agents, such as Hunter and James Biden, had a fiduciary duty to act for the benefit of the public, an employer, shareholders, or a union, such as the fiduciary duty to the United States of America of a vice president or U.S. senator. 2. Defendant himself and or through his agents Hunter and James Biden knowingly devised and or participated in a scheme to defraud another of the intangible right to honest services through a scheme to violate his or her fiduciary duty through bribery or kickbacks paid by persons or entities not deceived by the scheme or participating in the scheme, with the intent to defraud those to whom he owed the fiduciary duty. Defendant's scheme to defraud involved a materially false or fraudulent pretense, representation, or promise, possibly including omission and concealment of material information capable of influencing the decision of others. You must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all 8 of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendant of the charges under 8 charges under Count 5. Count 6, 18 U.S.C. Section 1346. Count 6 of the indictment charges the defendant with wire fraud, which is a violation of federal law under 18 U.S.C. Section 1346. In order to indict the defendant of this offense, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor provided that each of the following 4 elements is supported by probable cause. 1. Joe Biden himself and or through his agents, such as Hunter and James Biden, voluntarily and intentionally devised or participated in a scheme to defraud another out of money, and defendant acted upon the scheme with the intent to defraud, and it was reasonably foreseeable that interstate or international wire communications would be used, and interstate or international wire communications were in fact used. You must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all 4 of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendant of the charges under Count 6. Count 7, 18 U.S.C. 1961 through 1968. Count 7 of the indictment charges the defendant with racketeering, influenced, and corrupt organization, which is a violation of federal law under 18 U.S.C. 1961 through 68. In order to indict the defendants of this offense, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has proved that each of the following 7 elements is supported by probable cause. 1. Defendants conducted or participated in a covert enterprise, either as an independent covert entity or within a legitimate business or organization, possibly including a government agency, and the enterprise was engaged in or its activities affected interstate commerce or international commerce. The enterprise engaged in a pattern of 2 or more predicate criminal acts within the last 10 years. Defendants knowingly conducted the enterprise's affairs or knowingly participated directly or indirectly in the conduct of the enterprise's affairs through a pattern of racketeering activity, meaning a pattern of 2 or more related criminal activities, felonies, not merely misdemeanors, within the last 10 years. The acts of racketeering activity amounted to or posed a threat of continued criminal activity, and defendants conducted or participated directly or indirectly in the conduct of the enterprise's affairs through the pattern of racketeering activity. 7. The enterprise existed separate and apart from the alleged pattern of racketeering activity. To prove probable cause of an association in fact enterprise, the prosecutor need not show that the group had a hierarchical structure or a chain of command. Decisions may be made on an ad hoc basis and by any number of methods. The prosecutor also need not show that members of the group had fixed roles. Different members may perform different roles at different times. The prosecutor need not prove that the group was a business-like entity or that it had a name or regular meetings or established rules and regulations or the like. An enterprise is also not limited to groups whose crimes are sophisticated, diverse, complex, or unique. You must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all 7 of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendant of the charges under Count 7. Count 8. 18 U.S.C. 115 and 2384. Count 8 of the indictment charges that the defendant was with seditious conspiracy, which is a violation of federal law under 18 U.S.C. 115 and 2384. The indictment charges that all of the defendants, Joe, Hunter, and James Biden, participated in a conspiracy, which is simply an unlawful agreement with each other and with other persons to do at least one of 2 things. 1, to levy a war of urban terrorism against the United States, or 2, to oppose by force the authority of the United States. In order to indict the defendants of this offense, you must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor showed that each of the following three elements is supported by probable cause. 1. Two or more persons conspired or agreed with one another with the goal of making war against the United States or of opposing by force the authority of the United States. And 2, two or more members of the conspiracy either formed the conspiracy or pursued its goals in the United States or its territories or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And 3, defendants joined in that agreement with awareness of one or more of its unlawful goals. You must find that the citizen's grand jury prosecutor has shown that all three of these things are supported by probable cause in order to indict the defendant of the charges under count 8. Jury deliberations, introduction. 1.
Let's stop there, Jason, because we'll give those instructions at the end of this proceeding. We put them all in one. I wanted to do this in a way that you had some preview as to what the criminal charges would be. We may be adding other criminal charges by the time the grand jury concludes and goes off to deliberate, such as the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. We may insert that as well as other aspects of the alleged violations. One of the things that you should keep in mind in doing these deliberations and weighing the information is that if you have any questions, we'll take questions at the end of the proceeding, not today, after we present everything. And we can do that and satisfy you with regard to all of the various elements that are involved. Now, right now, we're going to deal with the issue of, just to put it simply, the alleged accepting of bribes from communist China, from Ukraine in particular. And this is very important, particularly with regard to communist China, because China, obviously, given the fact that we have COVID-19, that communist China is responsible for that, given the fact that certain things are being said and done, even as we speak, a press conference will probably deal with that issue that the president is holding as this grand jury is proceeding. Obviously, alleged bribery with regard to China is a very, very serious matter, as well as Ukraine. Ukraine, which is a strategic country in Central Asia. Incidentally, I'm of Ukrainian origin, but that doesn't really matter. Don't hold that against me. So the fact is that we're going to be proceeding here. And we're also, in the next grand jury session, will be a little preview today at the end. I'll be proceeding with regard to what's going on at the southern border, because that is reckless endangering. That's a common law crime. And that's exactly what President Biden is being accused of doing right now, recklessly endangering the American people, as well as sedition, because this is allegedly a treasonous act to let these people into this country, particularly after the border had been essentially sealed under the prior administration. I don't want you to be intimidated. Anything that goes on in this case, obviously, we don't favor in this grand jury proceeding any political ideology or anything like that in this proceeding. We all have our own views, but we're going to be neutral. But I just want you to be aware that there will be people out there that will be severely critical of what we're doing, primarily from the left. They don't believe that President Biden should be held to account, but that's irrelevant. We need to hold him account under U.S. laws, under the laws of nature, and nature's God. Now, to give Jason a little rest from reading, because it's very hard for me to read off the screen what's going on here. He's deputized to read this on my behalf. I ask you all to take an oath. I'm going to give it to you right now. We've got about 15 grand jurors that are in play. Others who couldn't make it today can watch these proceedings, and they'll have an opportunity to deliberate and do other things. But do you solemnly swear to undertake your duties fairly and neutrally, without regard to any political or other bias, in reaching a decision whether there's probable cause to indict Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden's brother, James Biden? Do you swear to that?
Yes.
Okay. Let's proceed, Jason. I'm going to change the. Thank you, and we'll put that in writing too. so we have a record of that. But Jason, rather than your reading, because I want to read you a portion of a book that was written by Peter Schweitzer. He's the one who initially broke the story, if you want to call it a story, the tragedy of what's been going on with regard to Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, James Biden, and others in the Biden family who we haven't gotten to yet, and we will. We're just keeping it to those three. It's alleged to be a Biden family criminal enterprise, a RICO enterprise. His book, Profiles in Corruption, which was written in 2020, and Secret Empires. He did excellent investigative work and came forward with this information. Following that, others also recounted what was going on, taking information not just from Peter Schweitzer, but also the United States Senate, which conducted investigations when it was under the control of the Republicans. Of course, as usual, they did nothing with it. They didn't pursue it. It was for show. It wasn't for dough. Got them on Sean Hannity on Fox News, raised money by it, but never did anything. We, the American people, will do something, however, and we will follow through with it, as I said. But Jason, I want you to play so you can take a little rest, and also so people, can perk up a little bit, our grand jurors, the audio that we have of a National Review article written by Andrew McCarthy, which is also a renowned legal analyst and former assistant U.S. attorney. Are you able to play that right now?
I am bringing it up right now.
Okay. Then we're going to get back. We'll read Schweitzer's chapter of that book, but let's hear this first. And then we're going to read a letter that was written by Senator Charles Grassley when he was head of the Judiciary Committee. And we will also see the testimony of Tony Babilinski, who came forward to work with the Bidens, eyewitness, whistleblower, who, for lack of a better word, fingers Joe, Hunter, and James Biden and other Bidens in this racketeering scheme to enrich the Biden family at the expense of the American people, as we allege.
Okay, so this is an article titled A Collusion Tale, China and the Bidens. This originally appeared in the National Review. It was written by Andrew McCarthy, October 31st, 2020. We're going to play a computer reading of that now.
Yeah, and I might add, if this were a court of law, this would be admissible under the rules of evidence. But it's not necessary that we have Andrew McCarthy here or Peter Schweitzer here or even Bob Babilinski, because as Justice Scalia wrote, the evidence that's put in front of you, that is the information, does not need to be admissible in an ultimate trial. There will be an opportunity for a judge to rule on the admissibility of these various matters at a trial. Right now, you can hear anything virtually from any source, and you yourself determine whether it's credible or not, such that you will vote on whether there's probable cause for the crimes and other crimes that we just put forth in this proposed indictment. I'm not going to show you those indictments until this is over, but I wanted you to get a preview. So Jason, let's play the audio of this article by Andrew McCarthy.
A Collusion Tale. China and the Bidens, National Review. Not only were the Bidens' Chinese business contacts known to have ties to the regime, they also may have been clandestine agents. Understand what's going on here. The media Democrat complex is warning you, on the basis of no evidence, that if you don't close your eyes to the explosive revelations from Hunter Biden's computers, you will be abetting a Russian intelligence operation. Yet it has become increasingly obvious that this is because, if you open your eyes, you may find out that the Bidens were selling themselves to an actual Chinese intelligence operation. Among the more amazing revelations in the Biden corruption scandal that the media Democrat complex is blocking voters from seeing is this. The corrupt Chinese businessmen with whom the Bidens were colluding not only had a record of buying political influence, not only were known to have high-level ties to the Chinese Communist Party and the regime, but also were clandestine agents of China, at least. That's what the FBI and Justice Department seem to have told the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. The Bidens were seeking a $40 million liquefied natural gas, LNG, deal with a Shanghai-based energy conglomerate that was flying high until early 2018. By then, however, it had become crystal clear to Xi Jinping's government that the company's machinations on behalf of the regime had been penetrated by U.S. intelligence and law enforcement. formally went bankrupt earlier this year, but that was 2 years after the regime pulled the plug on its operations, which appear to have been a cover for Chinese intelligence operations. The Bidens, with former Vice President Joe Biden's son Hunter as the point man, dealt with SK in 2017. They were the beneficiaries of its corrupt practices and were smack in the middle of things when SK began to unravel due to American investigations that Hunter Biden agreed to look into on behalf of his partners. SK posed as a private company. Make no mistake, though SK was China. Its meteoric rise would not have been possible otherwise, and its rapid collapse happened because its usefulness as an instrument of the communist regime's influence was undermined by American surveillance operations. SK's precursor company was begun in 2002 by Yi Xianming, an obscure young man who became fabulously wealthy by opaque means. It is not hard to figure out what happened, though. The communist regime smiled on him. He has acknowledged getting his big break in 2006, when the regime permitted him to acquire assets it had confiscated from a major smuggler. Over the next dozen years, he lived the life of a globe-trotting tycoon. Hunter Biden, in the overstatement that appears to be a family tic, has referred to Yi as not only my partner but as the richest man in the world. Yi did indeed live large, but it was the Chinese government that let that happen, lavishly backing his venture, while he in turn spread China's influence, particularly by purchasing political connections in America, Europe, and Africa. From the start, the New York Times has reported, SK retained former top officials of the regime and was strongly tied to the Chinese Communist Party, establishing an internal party committee and rearing young officials through the Communist Youth League. Yi himself had been Deputy Secretary of the China Association for International Friendly Contact, CAFC. That is the public name for a division of China's People's Liberation Army, PLA, known as the General Political Department's International Liaison Department, as explained in a comprehensive report by the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, mainly compiled by Senators Ron Johnson, R., Wisconsin, and Chuck Grassley, R., Iowa. Naturally, after Xi Jinping disappeared Yi in early 2018, CAFC denied both that Yi had been associated with it and that it had anything to do with the PLA. In reality, as the Senate report elaborates, under Yi's leadership, SK conducted extensive joint activities with the PLA's General Political Department, and even funded a training center for applied psychological operations and propaganda directed against Taiwan. As the report concludes, Yi and his associates had robust relationships with China's military units, some of which were involved in matters in direct opposition to U.S. policy in the region. Designed to promote the communist regime's international muscle flexing, SK was a natural instrument of China's One Belt, One Road initiative, which Tsai announced in 2013. The Hoover Institution's Asia scholar, Michael Oslin, explains that OBOR is a form of debt trap diplomacy. Beijing entices foreign governments with billions in infrastructure aid, then manipulates them to do its bidding. The Washington Examiner's Jerry Dunleavy recounts that Yi told Caixin Global, a Chinese media outlet, that SK aimed to serve the state's strategy. And serve it he did. Yi, for example, was named a political advisor to a pro-Beijing member of Hong Kong's Legislative Council, a body China used for years to bring the formerly free zone to heel. SK's status as a private business was camouflage for the spread of China's tentacles. In its early 2017 heyday, when it began reeling the Bidens in, SK was the rare private company that was charged with storing part of the regime's strategic oil reserve. When Tsai visited Prague in March 2017, SK was along for the ride, applying to purchase a 50% stake in a major European banking giant, the Jant Finance Group, which had inroads not only to the Czech Republic, but Russia, Croatia, and Slovakia, among other places. The deal eventually fizzled because SK's funding seemed too fishy to the Czech Central Bank. But that was only after, in a nod to Beijing, Yi was formally appointed as an economic policy advisor to the Czech government, the company having become one of China's biggest investors in Central Europe, Reuters reported. And why not? SK was backed by a 30 billion yuan line of credit from the China Development Bank, which is formally controlled by the regime. In September 2017, SK was thus permitted to obtain a $9 billion stake of Rosneft, Russia's state oil giant. Even Vladimir Putin saw the wisdom of receiving a top SK executive at the Kremlin, as if he were Tsai's own emissary. United States intelligence agencies clearly took notice. As the Daily Caller's Chuck Ross reports, our government obtained at least one FISA surveillance warrant that yielded evidence against Xi Ping Patrick Ho, one of SK's heavyweights. The surveillance authorized by the FISA court included electronic eavesdropping as well as physical searching. As Russiagate and the challenges to investigating it have made painfully clear, FISA surveillance is classified. The government applications and evidentiary showings that lead to it are closely guarded national security secrets. Even on the rare occasions when evidence derived from FISA surveillance is used in court, as it was in Ho's eventual prosecution for corruption crimes, the lawyers for the defendant and the trial prosecutors are not informed of the factual basis that predicated the surveillance. The full breadth of the counterintelligence investigation is not revealed publicly. The full range of targets remains secret, and we learn neither how long the monitoring went on nor what specific intelligence gathering methods were employed. What we get is just a bare-bones notice, such as the Justice Department provided during Ho's prosecution, advising that FISA evidence would be offered at the trial. In the inevitable litigation over admissibility of this evidence, the public is permitted to see only bland legal discussions about the FISA statute and precedents. The underlying, classified facts that triggered the surveillance remain secret. This scenario is a good example of why revelations about counterintelligence investigations are sparse, and why U.S. spy agencies often push against Justice Department use of evidence collected through foreign intelligence surveillance operations, even to the point of trying to block indictments. Prosecution triggers discovery rules, the production to the defense of relevant information in sensitive government files. Moreover, when it is disclosed, even without providing much detail, that evidence has been collected under FISA, this alerts the foreign power at issue that its operations have been penetrated and monitored by U.S. intelligence agencies. That's why intelligence agents, even if they stumble upon provable criminal activity, hate prosecutions. Once the FISA hand is tipped, the foreign power takes steps to shut down whatever activities may have been compromised. To be clear, a FISA warrant would not have been issued, enabling surveillance that yielded evidence against the top SC official, unless the FISA court found probable cause of clandestine activity on behalf of a foreign power. We don't know exactly how many SC officials were under surveillance, or who they were, but it emerged at Ho's trial that the FBI had been monitoring SC since at least 2016. Government surveillance resulted in key corruption evidence against Ho, who worked directly for Yi. Indeed, the Times noted that, within days of Ho's arrest, Yi was interviewed by the FBI. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised, then, that Hunter Biden referred to Ho as the effing spy chief of China, as I related in a column on Wednesday. Ho is quite the character. He was the Home Affairs Secretary for the Hong Kong government in the early 2000s. Then, he launched a SC-backed non-government organization, the China Energy Fund Committee, SC-NGO, which was accredited by the United Nations and registered as a charitable entity in the United States. This gave Ho the resources and the cachet to practice SC's highly effective modus operandi. The bribery of influential foreign politicians and government officials, who were then relied on to open doors for SC and, derivatively, for China. At Ho's criminal trial in the Southern District of New York, prosecutors proved that he used SC-NGO as the vehicle for multi-million-dollar bribery schemes that roped in the president of Chad and Uganda's foreign minister. The Justice Department also presented email evidence demonstrating that Ho was asked to intervene with the Chinese state so it might arm Chad to fight the Boko Haram jihadist organization. Furthermore, Ho discussed similar possibilities of arming Libya and Qatar, as well as helping Iran move sanctioned money out of China. Ho was arrested in New York in November 2017. When that happened, the first call he made was to Joe Biden's brother, Jim, who has a long history of cashing in on his brother's political influence. Jim Biden says he assumed the call was intended for Joe's son, Hunter. That is probably true. After all, in the summer of 2017, months before Ho's November arrest, Hunter Biden had agreed, at Yi's request, to represent Ho as a lawyer. As the New Yorker reported in its sympathetic mega-profile of Hunter, Yi explained that he feared, correctly as it turned out, that Ho was under investigation by U.S. authorities. Hunter, who occasionally dabbles in the practice of law, agreed to try to determine whether and to what extent Ho was in legal jeopardy. By then, Yi and SC had enticed Hunter and the Biden family with promises of a huge financial score. Yi had been seeking connections with eminences on both sides of the Washington's political aisle. These feelers eventually landed Yi a May 2017 meeting with Hunter in Miami. They began negotiating a joint venture between SC and the Biden family, the $40 million LNG project on Monkey Island in Louisiana, which Hunter, in familiar Biden-esque exaggeration, described in his recorded rant as a $4 billion deal to build the largest effing LNG port in the world, adding that he'd negotiated the deal at Yi's $58 million apartment. Yi certainly followed SC's negotiation style in dealing with Hunter. Besides promising astronomical returns for his politically influential partners, Yi followed up the meeting by sending Hunter a thank you card and a 2.8-carat diamond. Hilariously, Hunter told the New Yorker's Adamantos that it never occurred to him that this could be a bribe, What would they be bribing me for? My dad wasn't in office. Leaving aside the fact that Joe Biden was already preparing his 2020 presidential run, Hunter made clear to business partners involved in the negotiations that he was pushing the deal because he wanted to be associated with the Biden family name. Of course, it is not Hunter Biden who makes that name a valuable commodity. It was Hunter's negotiations with Ye that generated emails, first reported in the New York Post, which set forth the expected remuneration package. The emails are said to come from Hunter Biden's computers, and the ones relevant to have been corroborated by Anthony Babilinski. He is a former naval officer and wealthy investor who was recruited by James Gillier, a Hunter Biden associate, to structure the partnership between SP and the Bidens, not just Hunter, but the family. Babilinski is a participant in the emails and had several face-to-face meetings with Hunter and Jim Biden, as well as at least 2 personal meetings with Joe Biden. Babilinski has related that, in the equity distribution as originally conceived, Hunter was to receive a 20% cut, and to hold an additional 10% for his father, Joe Biden, referred to as the big guy in the relevant email, while Joe's brother, Jim Biden, was also to get 10%. Babilinski indicates that, by the time the deal was finalized, Joe's 10% cut was to be held by Jim rather than Hunter. As the Wall Street Journal's Kim Strassel details, and as Babilinski himself verified in an interview with Fox News' Tucker Carlson, Babilinski became disenchanted with the deal as it was negotiated in the spring and summer of 2017. He saw it as an energy business venture that required business protocols and corporate governance. He came to believe Hunter regarded it as a personal piggy bank, and objected to the fact that Hunter brought no value other than his name. The Biden name, however, was what China wanted. And to repeat, SK was China, and everybody knew it. Gillier admonished Babilinski that the players on this side of the venture are intelligent so they understand the value added by the Biden connection. In text messages, Hunter scolded Babilinski, reminding him that SK execs were coming to be my partner to be partners with the Bidens, and that in this instance only one player holds the trump card and that's me. May not be fair, but it's the reality because I'm the only one putting an entire family legacy on the line. Hunter knew SK was under U.S. government investigation. Not only did Ye tell him that, Hunter agreed to look into it as counsel for Patrick Ho. In a May 2017 text, Gillier reminded Babilinski, "Don't mention Joe Biden being involved. It's only when you are face to face. I know you know that, but they are paranoid." Actually, it is not paranoia when you are nervous because you know you are cutting dubious deals with shady characters tied to a hostile foreign regime. Is it any wonder that Jim Biden told Babilinski that the family was ever mindful of having plausible deniability? The LNG venture collapsed on the Chinese end, the promised millions in capitalization never materializing. But while this cut out such participants as Babilinski, the Bidens figured out a way to get paid. As the Senate report details, Ye had an underling, Gongwen Dong, establish a line of credit through a business they controlled, Hudson West 3 LLC, issuing credit cards for Hunter, Jim Biden, and Jim's wife, Sarah. The three charged more than $100,000 luxury item purchases. On August 4, a subsidiary partially underwritten by a Chinese state-owned petroleum company, Shanghai Huaxing Group, sent Hunter's law firm, Owasco, another $100,000. 4 days later, a subsidiary wired $5 million to Hudson West 3. Over the next year, nearly $4.8 million of these funds were transferred to Owasco, said to be for consulting. During the same period of time, Owasco funneled nearly $1.4 million to Jim Biden, through the bank account held by Jim and Sarah Biden, under the auspices of a consulting firm, the Lion Hall Group. Hudson West also sent over $76,000 directly to Jim Biden's Lion Hall Group, during 2018. On November 2, 2017, SK attempted to send Hunter Biden's firm $1 million through the Hudson West 3 account. As the Senate report details, SK initially explained this payment as a consultation fee to Hudson West 3 for market investigation of a natural gas project which was deemed unnecessary, resulting in the refund of the money. However, Hunter Biden later acknowledged that it was a $1 million fee that should have gone to his law firm for the representation of Patrick Ho, but had to be refunded because Hunter provided the wrong wire transfer instructions. The problem was subsequently corrected, and the payment went through. Yet, the end was near. On November 18, Ho was arrested by the FBI at JFK International Airport in New York City after he arrived on a flight from Hong Kong. When he was permitted to make a phone call upon being detained, Ho chose to call Jim Biden, the brother of a former vice president and soon-to-be presidential candidate. Jim later told The Times that he was surprised by the call, "I bet," and assumed Ho meant to call Hunter, whose contact information Jim gave to Ho. "There is nothing else I have to say," Jim told the paper. "I don't want to be dragged into this anymore." Evidently, Jim made no mention of any dragging by the expense account and payments that had been steered his way thanks to Spingy, for whom Ho worked, and by whom Jim's nephew, Hunter, was being generously paid to serve as Ho's lawyer. 6 weeks after Ho's arrest, Yi sent staff what would turn out to be a final directive, in what the Financial Times described as a poem in traditional Chinese style, stating, "Take heavy responsibility for the Belt and Road, work harder to make new moves." On February 8, 2018, federal prosecutors announced in a court filing that they would be introducing against Ho evidence derived from classified foreign intelligence surveillance. About a week later, Yi was detained in China, on the order of Xi Jinping. It is said to be a bribery investigation, but Yi has not been seen or heard from since. Or, as Hunter Biden put it, "The richest man in the world is missing, who was my partner." For over 3 years, the American people were barraged with a media Democrat drumbeat, fueled by anonymous intelligence agency leaks but based on no actual evidence, that Donald Trump had colluded in the intelligence operations of a hostile foreign power. Journalists and investigators scorched the earth searching for proof, particularly any financial exchanges between Trump associates and shady Russian characters tied to the Kremlin. They came up empty. Next Tuesday, the media Democrat complex would have the American people elect as their president Joe Biden, who, based on significant evidence, appears to have been ensnared in his family's energetic collusion with clandestine operatives of a hostile foreign power. And there is no doubt that millions of dollars were exchanged, going to the Biden family from shady Chinese characters with significant ties to the Chinese Communist Party and the regime of Xi Jinping.
Latest Andrew Cuomo COVID-19 scandal implicates...
Sorry.
Yeah, Cuomo, that's appropriate too. This is very important because you see the way it works. And this is what I've been fighting nearly all my professional life since I started Judicial Watch, ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida, and then came out and run and founded Freedom Watch, is that you see the government, if you want to use that term, and I don't believe we have a government right now, to be honest, because you see, they never held anyone accountable in the Biden family. They went after some Chinese, the guy winds up going missing, no one's held accountable for anything. This is the way it works. And this is why a citizen's grand jury is important and why what you're doing is so important, because they don't go after the higher ups. The Democrats and the Republicans, the establishments of both parties, protect each other. Washington, D.C. is making money hand over fist, growth, buildings, riches, never affected by a recession. They don't want to rock the boat. They just go merrily along, deceiving the American people, letting you believe, of course, we no longer believe that they are actually bringing people to justice, but they don't. And that's why my alma mater, who I was once proud of, that's why I started Judicial Watch and later Freedom Watch, is because we do not have a Justice Department that will hold the rich and the powerful to account. Remind you of something? Go back to the days of King George III, who took our legal system back to the Court of St. James, took it away from us. And what did the colonialists do and our founding fathers? They reestablished their own legal system. And it was not part of the statutory law or the edicts of the king. And that's what we're now doing. Now, I'm going to play right now because we're going to go back into Peter Schweitzer's work, Profiles in Corruption, and we're also going to read a letter from Charles Grassley. Typically, this tells you something as well about the Republicans. Grassley writes this letter detailing just what Andrew McCarthy had written, in effect, and simply asks for information as to whether Hunter Biden and James Biden had registered as foreign agents. And that's as far as the Republican chairman of the Judiciary Committee ever went. And then there was a report by Senator Ron Johnson of the Committee on Finance and Homeland Security, two committees, which laid it all out, but the Republicans did nothing, not a zip. This is exactly the situation and why you are here today, because the American people will rise up and establish the rule of law. One step is this citizens' grand jury. Now, Jason, I want you to play right now so we can keep it moving along. The interview of Tony Babilinski, that's a big part of what Andrew McCarthy had written about, put together, taken from Peter Schweitzer, Senate reports, and everything else. Let's play that interview, and then Jason's going to identify some of the emails that Babilinski had tying Joe Biden directly to this massive bribery scheme in exchange for favorable treatment for China and Ukraine while he was vice president.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We're going to devote the entire next hour to a single interview, something we've never done before. In this case, it's a conversation with a man called Tony Babilinski. Babilinski is the former business partner of James and Hunter Biden, of course, the brother and the son of the current Democratic candidate. A lot has been written about Hunter and James Biden recently, but our story is not about them tonight, sleazy and shocking as some of those details are. The story we're about to tell you is instead about Joe Biden, the man who just days from now could be elected president of the United States. Joe Biden, and we can tell you this with certainty, had direct personal involvement with his family's business dealings in communist China and likely in other countries as well. The former vice president, of course, has vehemently denied that. He is lying. Tonight we can prove that. Before we begin, a word about Tony Babilinski. Babilinski is not a conventional whistleblower. He has no political agenda. To the extent he has supported candidates in the past, he's given exclusively to Democrats. Nor is he seeking money now from this story. This is not a shakedown of the Bidens or of anyone else. Babilinski is already rich, significantly rich. He is a significant figure in American finance. And that's exactly why the Biden family sought him out in the first place. They had no idea how to structure the deals they hoped to cash in on, so they enlisted Tony Babilinski to do it for them, to do the math. Now they're attacking him as an agent of Russian disinformation. And that's why Babilinski is appearing on this show. It is an effort to clear his family's name of that slur. He had no choice. The rest of the national media have suppressed his story. Reporters have ignored, intentionally ignored, and in many cases dishonestly distorted scores of documents proving that Babilinski's account is true. Never in American history have more power centers in this country aligned to kill a legitimate news story in the days before an election. That's what's happening right now. If you're looking for a real threat to our democracy, an actual threat, you're watching it unfold. We're seeing it firsthand. Last night, we experienced an extraordinary attempt to interfere with our reporting on the Biden family. We'll bring you details on that soon. But for now, here is Tony Babilinski's story. We recorded this interview with him a few hours ago in a hotel in Los Angeles. So, Tony, your connection to this deal came through James Gillier, who's an English businessman who you, correct me if I'm wrong, you had met while doing business in various different countries. You talked about doing deals. Then on Christmas Eve 2015, he sent you the following text, which explained the deal with China that he wanted you to become part of. And I just want to read the first sentence of this. There will be a deal between one of the most prominent families from the U.S. and them constructed by me.
Yes, that's correct.
Tell me what he was saying.
So James Gillier was referencing something that he had been working on throughout 2015 with Rob Walker and a Chinese company called CEFC. And he had been traveling around the world developing that deal. And that text was just the culmination of him making me aware that the deal was moving forward.
So he doesn't say, I want to do a deal with you and me and Hunter Biden, or even you, me, Hunter Biden, and Jim Biden. He said, between one of the most prominent families from the United States. He's talking about the Biden family.
Yes, that's correct. It was never about Hunter Biden or Jim Biden. It was about the family name, the Biden legacy.
At this point, Joe Biden was the sitting vice president of the United States.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I want to fast forward to 2017, early May 2017. And at this point, you've agreed to become part of this deal. Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, the vice president's brother, James Gillier, and they're asking you to meet with the former vice president in Los Angeles. Describe the context, describe why they wanted you to meet with him.
Okay. Across those days in Los Angeles in May of 2017 that you're referencing, I met with Hunter Biden multiple times at the Chateau Marmont and Rob Walker. And the discussion was they wanted me to sit down with their father just to meet him and at a high level discuss the Biden family and how they approach things.
Let me ask you to pause. Will you explain to us who Rob Walker is?
Yeah, Rob Walker was a partner in Rosemont Seneca and had a very close relationship with the Biden family, and had developed and been working with James Gilliar throughout 2015 and 2016 to develop this deal with the Chinese and CFC.
What was his relationship with the Biden family?
So my understanding is Rob had worked in prior administrations and had a very, very close relationship. In fact, in Rob Walker's own words, in an email to me, he states that everyone was contributing or telling me how they wanted to participate in Sinohawk. And in an email, he basically states, in his own words to me, I want to continue acting as a proxy for Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and the Bidens around the world.
The Biden family.
The Biden family.
So they wanted you to meet with the former vice president in LA. How did that play out?
That's correct. The former vice president was flying in, and we were to meet at the Beverly Hilton. The Milken Conference was going on, obviously one of the top 3 conferences in the world for anybody that's a global investor or developing different humanitarian causes and a variety of things. And Joe was flying in to speak about the cancer and the moonshot stuff he was working on, and Hunter and everyone was in town, and they wanted to coordinate me meeting with Joe. And so it was set up for the night of May 2nd at the Beverly Hilton. I first met with Hunter Biden and Jim Biden, and just had a light discussion where they briefed me that, listen, my dad's on the way, and we won't go into too much detail on the business front, but we'll just spend time talking at a high level about you, your background, the Biden family, and then he's got to get some rest because he's speaking as at the conference in the morning.
So this was at night. The vice president, just flown across the country. He's an older man. He's got work to do.
Correct.
But they carved out a piece of his schedule for you to meet with him. Why would they do that?
Because they were sort of wining and dining me and presenting the strength of the Biden family to get me more engaged and want to take on the CEO role and develop Sinohawk both in the United States and around the world in partnership with CEFC. And as you can imagine, I've been asked by 100 people over the last month, why would you be meeting with Joe Biden? And I sort of turned the question around to the people that asked me, why at 10:38 on the night of May 2nd would Joe Biden take time out of his schedule to sit down with me in a dark bar at the Beverly Hilton, sort of positioned behind a column so people couldn't see us, to have a discussion about his family and my family and business at a very high level, where Jim Biden sat and Hunter Biden participated in. I'm irrelevant in the story. They weren't raising money from me. There was no other reason for me to be in that bar meeting Joe Biden than to discuss what I was doing with his family's name in the Chinese CFC.
And this is a company with direct connections to the Communist government of China. So the former vice president has said he had no knowledge whatsoever of his son's business dealings and was not involved in them at all. But this sounds like direct involvement in them.
Yeah, that's a blatant lie. When he states that is a blatant lie. Obviously, the world's aware that I attended the debate last Thursday. And in that debate, he made a specific statement around questions around this from the president. And I'll be honest with you, I almost stood up and screamed liar and walked out because I was shocked that after 4 days or 5 days that they prepped for this, that the Biden family is taking that position to the world. And once again, I'm irrelevant in this discussion. I just was brought in to run this company and have been exposed to all of this fact. And I believe the American people should see this fact. I would have much preferred the Biden family go on record and define these facts for the American people and the globe versus me sitting here having a discussion with you on it.
So Joe Biden has not denied meeting with you in Los Angeles, correct?
Correct.
Tell us about the conversation that you had with him.
So I initially was sitting, because I got there a little earlier, was sitting with Jim Biden and Hunter Biden. And Joe came through the lobby with his security, and Hunter basically said, hey, give me a second. I'll go over and give me 10 minutes to brief my dad and read him in on things. And so then Hunter and his father and security came through the bar. And obviously I stood up out of respect to shake his hand, and Hunter introduced me as, this is Tony, Dad, the individual I told you about that's helping us with the business that we're working on and the Chinese.
So it was clear to you that Joe Biden's son had told him about this business?
Crystal clear.
Crystal clear. Tell us about the conversation that subsequently occurred between you and Joe Biden.
So the conversation, as you're well aware, Tucker, I grew up the son of a career naval officer. So the president of the United States was always the commander in chief, whether they were a Democrat or Republican or other. And so I had the highest respect for Joe and the office that he had held. And so I stood up and shook his hand, and obviously we sat down and I think ordered some drinks. I think Jim Biden was hungry and might have ordered some food. And, Joe asked me to talk about my background, my family. He thanked me for my service. I'm obviously very proud of that, proud of my brother's service and my grandfather's service. And then he walked through sort of his family, obviously some of the tragedies they've dealt with, his political career in a high level. We didn't go into too much detail on business because prior to Joe showing up, Hunter and Jim had coached me. Listen, we won't go into too much detail here. This is just a high-level discussion and meeting. So it's not like I was drilling down with Joe about cap tables and details.
So you said that they wanted you to meet Joe Biden as a way to induce you to participate in this deal. You were the actual business guy here who had management experience, deal experience. But it also sounds like Joe Biden was vetting you to some extent.
Yes, of course. I didn't request to meet with Joe. They requested that I meet with Joe. And, he's putting his, and Hunter says this in writing. It was referenced multiple times. They were putting their entire family legacy on the line. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were dealing with a Chinese-owned, enterprise run by Chairman Yi, CFC, that had strong financial support and political support from the Chinese Communist Party. That's how it was presented to me. That's not my own words. That's how they presented it to me and read me in on it. And
they being Gillier and Hunter Biden.
They being Hunter Biden, who was very proud of that and taking credit for it when I sat with him for 2 hours on the patio of the Chateau Marmont in L.A.
Proud that they were doing a deal with the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, proud that that he had the relationship with Chairman Yi, who was running CFC, and the ability for them to get deals done around the world and stuff like that.
You've seen a number of journalists, reporters covering this story, including some who should know better, declare triumphantly that no document you've released connects the former vice president to this deal. How do you react to that? What's your answer to it?
So you can imagine what I've been through over the last couple months, and knowing all this to be fact, and watching Joe Biden and his family and their lawyers trout around the world stating that there was no involvement, or even at the debate, Joe Biden referenced that you've seen my tax returns and there's no money from foreign, enterprise in that. I want to simplify this for the American people as much as I can. On May 13th, that email was sent from James Gillier to me. I didn't generate that email. James Gillier generated that email. And in that email, James Gillier goes through intimate detail of what each individual's requests were from a compensation perspective and how the equity in the enterprise would be divvied up. Very important. May 13th, that email was generated by somebody else to me. In that email, there's a statement where they go through the equity. Jim Biden's referenced as 10%, doesn't say Biden, it says Jim. And then it has 10% for the big guy held by H. I 1,000% sit here and know that the big guy is referencing Joe Biden. That's crystal clear to me because I lived it. I met with the former vice president in person multiple times, and I had been meeting and talking with Hunter Biden and Jim Biden and Rob Walker and James Gillier. Where the media has tried to hide, and I personally feel it's disgusting, is between that May 13th email and the final document that was executed called Oneida Holdings, LLC. In Oneida Holdings, LLC, the equity is broken up 20% Hunter Biden, 20% Jim Biden. Well, there are LLCs that represented them.
Right.
20% James Gilliar, 20% Rob Walker, and 20% me and my investment entity. What I'd ask the American people to read and look at is how from May 13th to the final Oneida document that got executed did Jim Biden go from a 10% owner to a 20% owner? That's not my question to answer. I'm sure there were discussions within the Biden family. I wasn't privy to that discussion. But this is Jim Biden, the brother of the potential future president of the United States. It's not a distant cousin. It's not an employee. It's his brother who in documents defines himself as a political advisor to his brother. And so I'll leave that to the American people to answer that. But I don't understand how the American journalist is allowing that gap to be even talked about and defined.
So, and I should say, and I want to put the document on the screen, in his pitch to the Chinese, in his bio, Jim Biden describes himself as an advisor, a current advisor to his brother. So was it clear to you from the beginning that what Jim Biden was bringing to this deal was his relationship with Joe Biden?
Yeah, 1,000%, crystal clear. After I met with Joe Biden the morning of May 3rd at the Milken conference, and then was taken backstage after Joe had spoken, you know, we joked around for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then I walked him out to his car. I think he was, I think they referenced he was off to see the lieutenant governor.
This is Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, yes. Yeah. And then after that, I went over to the Peninsula Hotel and I sat with Jim Biden for 2 hours where Jim Biden walked through his history and his own words stating all the work and effort he did to get Joe Biden elected initially in Delaware and then through the family history and the role that he had played in it. And in that meeting, remember, I'm the son of a naval officer. I'm a naval officer, was a naval officer myself. And because I held a Q clearance, which is the equivalent of a top secret clearance, we're audited every year. So if you receive a gift, I think the barrier was $25. Anything larger than $25, we had to disclose it to the government because obviously anybody with a clearance, the government is watching closely that they're not influenced by the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese, and stuff like that. So as I was listening to Jim walk through this, I have a big heart. If you talk to anybody who knows me, they would weigh in on that. I'm a kind person, and I'm thinking about the Biden family. Like, how are they doing this? I know Joe decided not to run in 2016, but what if he ran in the future? Aren't they taking political risk or headline risk? And I remember looking at Jim Biden and saying, how are you guys getting away with this? Like, aren't you concerned? And he looked at me and he laughed a little bit and said, plausible deniability.
He said that out loud?
Yes, he said it directly to me, one-on-one in a cabana at the Peninsula Hotel after about a hour and a half, 2 hour meeting with me asking out of concern, how are you guys doing this? Aren't you concerned that you're going to put your brother's, future presidential campaign at risk? The Chinese, the stuff that you guys have been doing already in 2015 and 2016 around the world. And I just can almost picture his face where he sort of chuckles and says, plausible deniability.
So he said, this is a man who's been drafting off his brother's political career for almost 50 years. He said to your face, essentially, we're lying about it. Anyone watching this interview can look up what plausible deniability means, and the definition is very distinct. That's remarkable. So I just want to back up a second, just to be clear. You met with Joe Biden twice.
Yes, that's correct.
What did he say to you after? So he gives his speech at the Milken conference. And by the way, this is all checkable, right? I mean, that was a public event. You can Google it.
Well, you can go to Milken. They had to issue me. I wasn't attending Milken, so they had to issue me special credentials. A whole team walked out into the valet, the Beverly Hilton, and walked me into that speech that he gave and sat me at the head table in front of everyone. So this is more than checkable. I'm sure there's photos or documentation and stuff like that.
The press corps doesn't seem to be rushing to verify this. It's checkable because it's true. And And the fact you may be hearing some of it for the first time here tells you everything about the lying the rest of us have been subjected to for the past 6 weeks. When we come back, Tony Babilinski will tell us what he and Joe Biden discussed as they were backstage in Los Angeles at the Milliken Conference in May of 2017. And he will respond directly to claims by the former vice president and many other Democrats that he is working against American interests for a hostile foreign power. That's straight ahead.
They can pause it at this point. Pause it. Let's all take a 5-minute bathroom break. Okay. Catch your wind. We've been going for a couple hours, and we'll pick it up with the interview of Tony Babilinski when we get back.
The live stream will continue while people are standing by.
Okay.
If you're just joining us now, you're watching a live stream of Larry Klayman's Citizens Grand Jury. Larry is going to be presenting evidence and instructing the jury with regard to the indictment against Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden. We've been on a short break here, and we're going to be back in just a moment. I'm joined right now by Larry Klayman. Larry, how are you?
Yes. I want to say some things before we reconvene. All of what you've just heard and what you will see and hear has been before the U.S. government, Democrat and Republican, for quite a while. Former Attorneys General Sessions and Barr had the opportunity to conduct their own grand juries. We know obviously nothing happened in that regard and will not happen now because President Biden and Vice President Harris's Justice Department obviously won't look into these matters. But ask yourself this question as well, grand jurors. Senator Grassley, I'm going to read the letter to you that he wrote with regard to the Foreign Registration Act for lobbyists and others that he wrote to the Justice Department. Lindsey Graham, who was head of the Judiciary Committee after him, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, these senators, Rand Paul, and of course McConnell himself, who was implicated, and we'll get to him in another grand jury. Tom Cotton, who appears regularly on Fox News boasting about what he's going to do with regard to China, does nothing. Jim Jacobs, same thing. Representatives, senators, etc. This is the responsibility that you have. You've been abandoned, the American people, by your own government. There are two systems of justice, one for the elite and one for you. So with that in mind, let's proceed. And also remember, hearkening back to the days that I ran Judicial Watch and triggered the Chinagate scandal at that time with the Clintons. Nothing happened then either, other than the fact that we exposed what was going on. So here we are, 2021, March 25th. You have no Justice Department. You have no justice. That's the responsibility that you have as citizens' grand juries, because the American people are taking back our own legal system. Jason, let's see the second part of the Babilinski interview.
Before we proceed, Larry, I do want to remind our viewers that they can support you and your efforts at Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org, and people who contribute the tax-deductible amount of $50 are going to receive a complimentary copy of Larry's new book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. So we're going to proceed now with the second part of Tony Babilinski's discussion with Tucker Carlson.
We just showed you the first 20 minutes of our interview a few hours ago with Tony Babilinski, well-known international businessman who was asked by the Biden family to do business with them in China. He met with the former Vice President Joe Biden 2 separate times, and they talked about the China business deal. Now, this information has been out for several weeks. It's been in the hands of a number of different news organizations. The reason you're hearing a lot of this for the first time tonight on this show is because they have resolutely ignored it and tried to suppress the story. Joe Biden has rarely been asked about it, though there is an enormous amount of detail and documentation that no one has refuted because it's real. This topic did come up because the president pushed it at last week's presidential debate. And what was notable was that Joe Biden didn't deny any specifics about his connections to the Chinese Communist Party, his family doing business there, he himself participating in that business. Instead, Biden dismissed the entire story out of hand and suggested that Tony Babilinski, who is a veteran, a former naval officer, was part of a Russian disinformation campaign aimed at this country. His evidence for that? Well, there wasn't any. Instead, he cited a letter from, quote, 50 former national intelligence folks, almost all of them partisans, every one of them a liar. None of them had directly assessed the information. Not one of them called Tony Babilinski. They knew nothing. Joe Biden said that on stage. And so when we spoke to Tony Babilinski, we asked him his reaction to that. And here's what he said. Tell me about the conversation that you had with Joe Biden. What did he say to you?
You mean the morning after he spoke?
That's right.
There was 10 people running around, getting him something to drink, and we were backstage in a cramped space, and he asked me to walk with him out to the car, and he just asked, how I did and what I thought of his speech. And I thought he did a great job in the speech. And obviously cancer is a very serious thing that we should all be working together to solve. I just lost a sister-in-law within the last 2 weeks, sadly to cancer. And then he just sort of asked me to keep an eye on his son and his brother. Yeah.
What do you think he meant by that?
I think it was conscious of things, and I can't speak for him. Maybe
right.
I would love for him to go on record. As I referenced earlier, I'm only sitting here because they have not only have they not gone on record, they've denied it, and they've tarred my family name and a long history of serving this country, and have other congressmen out talking about Russian disinformation.
This whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin.
I held a top secret clearance from the NSA and the DOE. I served this country for 4 years in one of the most elite environments in the world, Naval Nuclear Power Training Command. And to have a congressman out there speaking about Russian disinformation, or Joe Biden at a public debate referencing Russian disinformation, when he knows he sat face to face with me, that I was traveled around the world with his son and his brother, to say that and associate that with my name is absolutely disgusting to me.
Did you complain about that? I mean, to suggest that you were committing treason or a part of a foreign attack on our democracy, which is how they characterized it. I mean, that's such a serious and I think unfair charge. Did you bring this up with them?
Well, in basic form, you're exactly right. They are publicly accusing me of treason right now, treating me like I'm insignificant, or the 50 years of history that my family served this country is insignificant. And that's why I'm sitting here having this. I assure you, this is the absolute last place I want to be right now, and the last thing I want to be doing right now. But I feel like I have a patriotic duty to this country and every American citizen to go on record and to find the facts for them and let them do their own work. Let them decide how they view those facts or not. But for the Biden family to deny these facts, and then not only deny them, they could have just said no comment. But they didn't say no comment. They then brought in Russian disinformation and basically associated my name with that, which is absolutely disgusting to me. And I had to go on the record. Last weekend, I was in Virginia. Sadly, my sister-in-law passed away at around, I think, 6:38 Saturday morning. That's the wife of my brother, who spent 28 years serving this country as a naval flight officer and just retired. So you can imagine me dealing with that and the tragedy of that. When I saw Adam Schiff go on record talking about Russian disinformation after this email had been posted online by the New York Post, and remember, that email was to me from James Gilliar, right? It wasn't, I wasn't blind carboned or CC'd on that. It was to me stating that I was going to be the CEO of this enterprise. I was at the end of my rope. And so I called Rob Walker and I told him that if that statement isn't retracted by Congressman Schiff by midnight on Sunday, that I was going on record and I was disclosing all the facts to the American government, to the American citizen, and the world. I was hoping the Bidens would do the right thing, or Schiff would retract his statement. But I could not allow another minute, another hour, or a day for my family's name to be associated or muddied up around Russian disinformation. So even as I sit here today, I would ask the Biden family to come on record and stop using my name or associating it with Russian disinformation. It's absolutely disgusting.
So this is Rob Walker, the representative of the Biden family. I believe his wife worked for the Biden family, apparently. So you said this to him. I won't go public. I just want them to retract the accusation that I'm an instrument of Russian disinformation. What did he say?
That's correct. Rob is under a tremendous amount of stress.
Right.
Obviously, his wife and a child. And he said, listen, let me make some calls. Let me call George, who's Hunter Biden's lawyer, and see what I can do. But he sort of presented it as if that's going to be impossible for me to get done. And, I'm not naive. I know that's not impossible to do. That's a single phone call from Joe Biden to Adam Schiff saying, basically go on record and retract your statement. You got over your skis. And when I was up late that night, and when the statement wasn't retracted, come Monday morning, I was ready to go on record. And how that record was, I was willing to go in front of any senator, any congressman, the Department of Justice, the FBI, or sit here with you, Tucker, and basically provide the facts to the American people and let them make their decision. This isn't a political focus of mine. People were accusing my family of treason after I served this country and defended this country.
So the reason you wound up here in this interview, and I just want to affirm for our audience, I don't think you had any desire to do this interview.
Absolutely no desire.
Is because nobody else told your story. So were you surprised, given the trove of documents you have, given the credibility that I think is apparent that you have, that no other news organization took the time to unpack this story?
Surprised is probably an understatement of the year. Shocked, because it would be different if this was my word against Jim Biden, Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden.
Right.
That would be a very slippery slope. Not something I would take the personal and family risk on it. But I've provided more documents and facts that validate times, meetings, who participated. That email to me on May 13th was generated by somebody else sent to me. It wasn't me generating. These text messages that I've provided are Hunter Biden in the first person, Jim Biden in the first person, James Gilliar in the first person, Rob Walker in the first person. It's not me generating the text messages. It's them speaking. So you can interview them. The FBI can interview them. Our government can interview them. But I was shocked that not only the media is not only discussing this, they're going to the other extreme. They're dismissing it as Russian disinformation. This country has heard enough about Russia. We went through 3 years of every day, Russia, Russia, Russia. It's just absurd. The Cold War is over.
And they're saying it about your family.
Yes.
The Biden family knew that you're going public with this. And you spoke to Rob Walker about it. Again, the self-described Biden family representative. And Biden family, meaning Joe Biden as well. What was his response when you let him know that you were going public with this?
Trying to coach me, trying to sort of say, hey, we don't want to do that. We don't want, press trucks out in front of our house. I'm going to have to move. I could lose my job. And all that, I'm not trying to cause any harm to anyone in this situation,
right,
let alone Rob Walker and his family, James Gilliar and his family. But basically, Rob's position was, if you go on record with all these facts, you'll bury all of us. If he doesn't come out on record, I am providing the facts.
You're just going to just bury all of us, man.
What was your response to that?
I was focused on pushing these guys to do the right thing, to demonstrate an ounce of integrity in front of the American people. They all know the facts. I live the facts. And luckily for the American people, all the facts are extremely well documented. I'm irrelevant in this discussion, so I can ride off, but the American people can read these texts, listen to the recording that you just played, read the legal documents that were executed in Delaware, and they can form their own conclusion. They don't need me to form the conclusion for them.
Give us a sense of your contacts with Hunter Biden. A lot of this is complex. There's a lot that we're not, and this is television, so we're not putting, everything that we have on the screen, right, because we can't. But for those who might suspect that you didn't really have a lot of contact with Hunter Biden, give us a sense of some of the places where you had conversations with him, and over what time frame.
So obviously, as we already discussed, throughout 2015 and 2016, while Joe was still the sitting vice president of the United States, these guys had been doing extensive work around the world in places like Oman, Luxembourg, Romania, that I was being made aware of, but I obviously hadn't come off the bench and agreed to be part of this.
I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you there. Oman, Luxembourg, Romania.
Correct.
So they don't speak any of these languages. Neither one of these guys has any record of success in business. Neither one has a background in international business. Why would they be doing business in Oman, Luxembourg, and Romania?
Because they have relationships and they have the Biden name that they're able to set up meetings and get people to jump through hoops in an interest to garner favor with the sitting vice president, Joe Biden.
So it sounds like Gillier is a legitimate business guy, someone who's fluent in the language of international
James
business.
Gillier, served his country. He's British.
Yes.
He's traveled around the world for decades. He's a very low-profile individual, but he's sharp, and he's as legitimate as they come.
Sounds it. But Hunter Biden and Jim Biden have a well-documented, decades-long record of business disasters. Did you get any sense that either one of these guys was qualified to be conducting this kind of business?
The only qualification they had was the Biden name.
But they seem to have parlayed that into quite a few deals in quite a few countries. And I interrupted you, so continue with where they were doing these deals.
Yeah, so you had asked, the extent of my communication with Hunter Biden. So when I decided to come off the bench and entertain being the CEO of Sinohawk Holdings, obviously I was brought up to speed on the work that they had been doing in Oman, Luxembourg, France, Romania, Kazakhstan, and stuff like that, because that was all going to be integrated into Sinohawk Holdings. And so you asked to the extent that I spent time with Hunter Biden. I personally was in Bucharest, Romania with Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, James Gillier, Rob Walker. I was in Monaco for the annual Grand Prix there. I was supposed to sit with Hunter Biden. I met him. I met on the patio of his hotel, and I sat there and waited for 2 hours. And you can imagine how angry and I was frustrated after sitting there for 2 hours waiting for him without a text, a phone call to let me know I can't make it or I'm tied up. And in a text that I think you guys are aware of and saw, the next day, he aggressively comes back at me that he couldn't attend the meeting that he himself set up. I stepped away from family and friends on the yacht that I was on with my friends to go sit with him for a couple hours. And he's effectively screaming into the phone that he could not pick up the phone and text me because he was with the Ukrainians and Mykola, the founder of Burisma, and that he was fighting for the only income he has on the Kazakhstan deal that apparently he negotiated. Now, I had no exposure to the Kazakhstan deal. I'm not aware of any of the particulars of that Kazakhstan deal. I just know for a fact there is a Kazakhstan deal because Hunter Biden in first person told me there was in the text that I think you guys have and you will show to the American people. It's not my job to determine what that deal is. I'll leave that up to the FBI or the Senate and the Congress to figure that out.
I just want to restate this. You are not a grifter. You're not someone who's selling access. You're a legitimate businessman who's done deals in a lot of different countries. So I just want you to assess once more, is there anything about Hunter Biden's personal experience, personal qualifications that would justify him doing a deal in Kazakhstan?
Absolutely nothing. The only thing that he had was the Biden family name and the fact that his father at one point obviously was a sitting vice president and potentially would run as a future president.
It sounds like a remarkably ambitious international business program they had running.
Extensive.
He and his uncle.
Extensive.
This is a small point, but I can't get over it. So you saw a number of reporters say, again, in an effort to bat away your story, your testimony on this, that the chairman referred to in a bunch of these emails was not Joe Biden. It was, in fact, the government of China. When you see people refer to the chairman thinks this, the chairman thinks that, they're talking about China and not Joe Biden. So I want to put up on the screen. Here is a text message you received from Hunter Biden to you. Hey, Tony, I have an idea. In light of the fact that we are in an impasse of sorts and both James's lawyers and my chairman gave an emphatic no, I think we should all meet in Romania on Tuesday next week. And so you're hearing reporters say that chairman was, in fact, the Chinese government. Here you have Rob Walker responding to you. Clearly there's some confusion over this, and he's saying, I'm going to put this on the screen now. When Hunter Biden said his chairman, he was talking about his dad.
Correct. There's two chairmen in the story. There's Chairman Yi, who was the chairman of CFC.
Yes.
In that text from Hunter Biden, he was not talking about the chairman of CFC. And what Hunter's referencing there is he spoke with his father, and his father is giving an emphatic no to the ask that I had, which was putting proper governance in place around Oneida Holdings.
So Joe Biden is vetoing your plan for putting stricter governance in the company. I mean, and it's right here in the emails.
Yeah, Tucker, I want to be very careful in front of the American people. That is not me writing that. That is not me claiming that. That is Hunter Biden writing on his own phone, typing in that I spoke with my chairman, referencing his father. If the world thinks that my chairman is not his father, then Hunter Biden would come forward and go on record and state to the world.
But you have the Biden family representatives, Rob Walker, saying right here, May 19th, no. When he said his chairman, he was talking about his dad.
Exactly.
But Joe Biden had no knowledge of any of these business deals. He told us that, and the press has repeated that message every day since. It is a lie, and everyone saying it knows it's a lie. Where'd the money go? When we return, Tony Babilinski will explain where the money went. There was a lot of it. We'll be right back. So bits and pieces of this story have been out there, and if you've been paying close attention, if you have, you may know that. In September, for example, the two Senate committees issued a report about a series of suspicious overseas financial transactions that involved the former vice president's son. But their report did not tell the full story. There was a lot of money here, and a lot of it flowed to the Biden family. Where did it go, and where did it come from? We asked Tony Babilinski that. Tell me about the money. So, in the end, the Chinese did send quite a bit of money.
Correct.
Where did it go?
So documents were all executed, even after this back and forth. And the Chinese CFC director Zhang, who's number 3 at the company, worked directly for Chairman Yi. And the way it was presented to me as a very senior Chinese Communist Party member, was assuring me that $10 million was being sent to our bank account that was set up at JP Morgan Chase to basically fund operations and grow the business. And that of that $10 million, we were capitalizing the business. So $5 million of that $10 million was being loaned to Oneida Holdings as a non-recourse loan from CFC. And the other $5 million was coming as CFC as their capitalization of the business, because we own 50-50 in the partnership. The Chinese and CFC never viewed me. I'm insignificant and irrelevant in this discussion. To them, it was always the Biden family. It wasn't Hunter Biden. It wasn't Jim Biden. It was the Biden family, who's obviously led and operated by Joe Biden. And in a document that you guys have, and I think it's been provided to the world, the Chinese referenced that because of their trust in the Biden family, that Chairman Yi and Director Zhang are excited about moving forward in this. And in that document, they referenced loaning $5 million to the BD family.
Right.
The BD family is the Biden family. And notice they didn't say we're loaning that money to Oneida Holdings, or we're loaning that money to Tony Babilinski, or we're loaning that money to James Gillier or Rob Walker. They, once again, not a document generated by me, a document generated by CFC, that they're loaning that money to the Biden family.
What are the implications of this going forward? If Joe Biden is elected president, which could very well happen, how does this constrain his ability to deal with China?
Are you asking for my personal opinion?
I am. I'm asking for your opinion as someone who's worked with the Chinese.
So I think Joe Biden and the Biden family are compromised. Obviously, I've referenced that I held a Q clearance. You're briefed on compromise and, who you're able to talk with and deal and do business with. And I just don't see, given the history here and the facts, how Joe can't be influenced in some manner based on the history that they have here with CFC and stuff like that. So as a citizen and an American taxpayer, I'm very, very concerned.
It seems at this point that there is so much documentation. And again, we have your documents, the ones that you retain, the text, the emails, and the legal documents. But presumably there are many others because there are a lot of other people involved in this. Is it possible that this stuff just disappears and nobody covers it for the next 4 years if Biden's elected? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of evidence out there.
I think the American people should be demanding that this is investigated, and I don't know what the right party to do that is. Is that the DOJ? Is that the FBI? Is that Congress? Is that the Senate? But there absolutely should be no scenario that this isn't investigated. And as you said, I probably have purview into 10%, just picking a round number of what was actually going on. And I would encourage the American people to go online and download Senator Johnson's 87-page report after watching this and read pages 65 through 87 and form your own conclusion. What I've come forward with is a piece in that puzzle that Senator Johnson and Senator Grassley did not have. They didn't have it because I hadn't gone on record, and all this information and documentation was kept very, very tight. You asked me if the information disappeared. I would expect that other parties have probably destroyed or gotten rid of information. I didn't. I have every email, every text, every WhatsApp that was exchanged, and I've provided that to the authorities, and here I am discussing it.
So you learned from the Senate report that the Chinese sent a great deal of money, but it didn't go where it was supposed to go, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So take the American people back to July 2017. I was being told by Director Zhang, who's a senior executive at CFC, that the $10 million was going to be funded in two tranches of $5 million and $5 million. Once again, the way they were approaching that is $5 million was a loan to the Biden family, and $5 million was their contribution to capitalize Sinohawk Holdings. That money didn't come in June, it didn't come in July, and I was in Europe traveling with friends and family, and I was frustrated because culturally there's a tendency to, hey, it's coming, and it wasn't coming. So I was very frustrated. But also in July 2017, something that happened is over July 4th weekend, while we were celebrating our Independence Day, President Xi was in Moscow meeting Vladimir Putin on an official visit. And in that meeting and in that, multiple days, Director Zhang was in Moscow participating in that. And Rosneft, or media in Russia, had leaked to the press that they were entertaining selling 14% of Rosneft, which is the state-owned, U.S.-sanctioned energy company of Russia, to CEFC. When I saw that leaked, you can imagine, once again, the clearance I held, the military background, sort of pushed away from the table like, whoa, this is stair-stepping things at a level that do I even want to be associated with, or do I even want to be near? Shortly after that information got out, I was told that Director Zhang's visa was denied. He could no longer get back into the U.S. for meetings or to, bring his wife and his kids to go to school in New York, and that it was denied multiple times. Jim Biden confirms that in text. James Gillier references it. Kevin, Dong Wen, who's the individual that's referenced in Senator Johnson's Senate report, he went by Kevin. His legal name is Dong Wen Gong, sorry. And so I was sort of walking on eggshells, what's going on? You're saying this money's going to be funded. It hasn't come in yet. I'm sort of near the end of my rope here. And then in September, easily validated, it's officially announced that CFC is buying 14% of Rosneft, once again, the state-owned energy company. And so at that point, I just sort of pushed away from the table. The money hadn't been funded into Sinohawk, and I was having daily discussions with James Gillier. What's going on here? The Biden name, Russia, China. I don't want to be anywhere, near this. I got to understand all the moving pieces. And so we went into the fall of 2017, very well documented. When Patrick Ho, who's an employee or an associate of CFC, landed in New York, he was detained by the U.S. government and put in jail for corruption, apparently for leaving shoeboxes of cash to 2 African presidents. And it started this downhill spiral of CFC as a company. Remember, President Xi was traveling around the world under the One Belt, One Road. That was their political approach. And CFC was the capitalistic side of the Chinese government, doing things that they could do on the capitalist side that the government couldn't get done. It's very well documented, the work that CFC did in the Middle East, in Czechoslovakia, in Romania, Kazakhstan, in Georgia, all over the world. When they announced that they were officially tendering for 14% of Rosneft, a deal valued at $9 billion, I sort of pushed away from the table like, okay, obviously that's taking priority over this discussion. I just sort of, was watching things play out once they detained Patrick Ho. I did reach out to Hunter Biden in October 2017, asking him, hey, listen, they haven't funded the $10 million. Have you done something that I'm not aware of? Have you gone around us? Have you started a parallel discussion with Chairman Yi that I should be conscious of? And in a variety of text messages that you've been provided, and I think the American people have been provided, he says, no, I didn't go around you, but oh, by the way, I'm acting as the personal attorney to Chairman Yi. Now imagine being in my shoes, looking at my phone, reading this text message from Hunter Biden. I just spent 6 months all out of pocket myself. Nobody was paying me. I was paying for my own travel, my own meals, my own cars, anything that was needed. And Hunter Biden is now telling me that he's meeting personally one-on-one with Chairman Yi in his $50 million penthouse in New York. And if he can't meet him, he's picking up the phone and calling him, but they only discuss things in person. You can imagine my anger and frustration there, because then I'm like, oh, this has gotten slippery. You have gone around me. What's going on here? And oh, by the way, Hunter, you're acting as the personal attorney to Chairman Yi while they're tendering for 14% of the Russian state-owned energy company, a deal valued at $9 billion? What am I missing here? And he sort of just plays it off. And he said, I'm working on a bunch of other personal things and visas and stuff like that, but doesn't go into a lot of detail. I'd love for you to ask him that. I'd love the American people to ask what those other special things were.
You've told your story in a very public way. What do you expect the consequences for you and your family will be?
So my focus right now is not the consequences on me. I'm actually trying to be selfless in this discussion. I think the consequences our country faces, that average American voter that's thinking about what presidential candidate they picked today or picked over the prior 2 weeks or in the future all the way up to the election. I'm doing this for them, not for my family, not for any money. I'm doing this out of a patriotic duty to our country based on my military background and my grandfather's background. So other people can determine the facts and what matters and how they want to vote. But I had to go on record because they chose to sort of mar up my name. So I have a former SEAL team protecting my family. I'm not at home right now, and I'll travel the next 4 years if I have to. I had to do this.
That's all we've got there, Larry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you can see what we're talking about here. Again, I keep emphasizing how important you are as citizen grand jurors. Not everybody's viewed on the screen who is a grand juror. Some wanted to be public, some didn't want to be public. But we will reach these issues. And again, when he says, I'll leave it to the FBI spending its time rounding up people who came to see President Trump speak on January 6th. And we have no knowledge of them doing anything in this regard. So the American people are under siege rather than the people that deserve to be, which is Joe Biden, his son, and his brother, as well as other family members that you'll see their role later. It was a Biden family criminal enterprise. Now, Jason, if you can show some of these emails that Tony Babilinski refers to, that'll be very helpful at this point in time.
And also, Larry, what I'd like to do is just share with you some commentary from our live stream audience people feel that Tony Babilinski's body language and
I don't want that to come in to the
Sorry.
grand jurors, right? No.
Got it. So the emails you're looking for.
Yeah, no, they have to. It's their own opinion, not the people who are watching it. I respect those people, and that's good. But we are trying to keep this citizens' grand jury pure, and I'm the only one that speaks in that regard as the prosecutor.
Okay, so we've got a series of documents that contain screen captures from Tony Babilinski's multiple phones. Some of these were shown during the interview. Text messages.
Okay, yeah, the ones that weren't written, if you could read them, Jason.
Should I start from the beginning?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is Oneida Holdings team. Hunter Biden, D.C. says, "Hey there, I'm using WhatsApp."
What's the certificate of that? WhatsApp is encrypted, okay?
Yeah.
In theory, no one can break into WhatsApp, so that's done in secret.
Right. I think some of these are a bit disjointed. This one's from May 19th, Hunter Biden, D.C. Hunter Biden, D.C. is listed twice. James Gillier is on there. He's talking about wealth, and I assume that's why you've endured this much brain damage to begin with. But we are where we are, and WhatsApp and overseas phone calls are not going to bring us to a solution. We all want the same thing, and from the outside, this must look like a bunch of reindeer games. So I propose we meet in Romania on Tuesday and hash this out. I believe this is the message that Tony Babilinski was discussing, where he indicated that Hunter Biden had called for a meeting in Romania. It goes on to say, and to add to it, if you are so worried about your family, you wouldn't be doing this because, as you said, all of your dad's lawyers and any lawyer would advise you and Jim not to touch this with a 100-foot pole. So if you're willing to take a risk, so be it. I'm willing to stand by your side and take the risk as well, but there has to be a balance in governance and the board. So these are the messages, Larry, related to Tony Babilinski's commentary that he wanted more governance in the company.
Yeah. Who wrote that email, Jason? Who
I believe these in the green here, or with this brightly colored background, that's Tony Babilinski. So he says,
continue.
"Hi, with all due respect, I think you are misrepresenting what James's lawyer said, and it's disheartening you would do such a thing. Also, I'm not sure which chairman you're referencing, but they clearly don't understand the agreement as it's written. Not sure why you have such concern with things, but I would chalk it up to you haven't sat down and gone through all the scenarios of the board. James is..." And then it's cut off. Then he says, "Keep at it, H." So that's how he refers to Hunter. That is exactly the point. I and all the partners around the table are trying to protect you and your family way more than you even obviously understand. But do please come to Monaco. I'll give you 3 cracks at trying to break my jaw before I respond. Rob Walker says, "Please stop." So it seems like there is some tension between Tony Babilinski and Hunter Biden based on these messages. So addressing the team, Babilinski says, "Obviously, we are all partners and working to take care of each other while also doing what we believe is best for the business. I'm trying to streamline and accommodate certain concerns while preserving governance and things. I'm adjusting the distribution language to read, we will distribute funds monthly, and if any member wants to see funds distributed intramonthly, they can make a request, and if each is available, it will be..." And the rest is cut off. Hunter Biden responds, "Well, Tony," addressing Mr. Babilinski, "it may just be the time of night or one too many drinks, but your trying to be funny is lost on me and probably most people who don't fall at the high end of the Asperger's spectrum. I'll say it one final time. I don't care how much money you've made and what teams you were captain of, or how many soulless oligarchs you call friend. Money doesn't interest me. Winning is ephemeral and fleeting.
And who wrote
that? That's Hunter Biden writing that.
Okay.
And it goes on. We're competing with Goldman Sachs, and the next we're spending hours. It seems to be a typo. We're competing with Goldman Sachs, and the next we're spending hours on why I wasn't invited to a dinner party. Must be maddening. You clearly see the path to not just riches, but real generational wealth. And I assume that's why you've endured this much brain damage to begin with. But we are where we are, and WhatsApp and overseas phone calls are not going to bring us a solution. We all want partnership and respect your position that you're risking your most valuable asset, time. And that's more important than 20% equity, no matter what tomfoolery the four of us may be up to. You could be CEO for 8 days and quit and still have an equal share. But that's beside the point, I guess, and maybe I'm exaggerating. The fact that you're even putting up with our cautious schizophrenia. One moment, we're competing with Goldman Sachs. They seem to be disordered here, but we're back to a Tony Babilinski message. The scenarios of the board, James is willing to recuse himself from the vote to remove any perception that he could side with me. So as the vote is defined, if something was divided where you, Jim, and Rob were on one side and I was on the other side, would encourage you to think of a solution on how you would cure that situation. We could arm wrestle for it, play bingo, have your chairman weigh in, or it's cut off. One request, though, stop the 5th grade group text insults. Jesus, my daughter's texts are more cogent and mature. And then here we have Tony Babilinski saying, keep at it, H. That's exactly the point. I and all the partners around the table are trying to protect you and your family, way more than you even obviously understand. But do please come to Monaco. Right, so and then this is... So we see, okay. He says, money doesn't interest me. Winning is ephemeral. This is back to Hunter. Winning is ephemeral.
Save it at this point, Jason. We'll get back into it next Thursday when we reconvene at the same time. What we're going to do is finish off the presentation of evidence with regard to China and Ukraine and the bribery scheme as alleged by the Bidens, including Joe Biden, of course. Next time, we will get into the work of Peter Schweitzer, both of his books, Secret Empires, Profiles in Corruption. We will get into the Senate report and also the letter written by then Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Charles Grassley. It was Tony Babilinski who paid particular attention to pages 65 to 87. Remember, he said that he's filling in the gaps. They didn't know where the money went. Well, now we know where the money went. And what's very important is that when the percentages were increased to 20% for James Biden, it had previously been mentioned that Joe Biden was going to get a 10% cut. So therefore, one has to conclude that the additional 10% was added into James Biden as a subterfuge to hide the fact that it was going to be funneled back into Joe Biden's accounts. You have to ask yourself this question, as Schweitzer points out in his book. Biden lives in a mansion in Delaware, his other houses as well. How does someone who has been in Congress and in the U.S. Senate for 47 years become a multi-millionaire on a salary which for most of that time was in the hundreds of thousands? Very expensive to live in Washington and Delaware. I know, I lived in Washington for almost 30 years. Most expensive city, I believe, in the United States, short of New York and Los Angeles, and maybe even rivaling at this point in time. And consequently, you know, the suits that he wears, everything else he wears, this is circumstantial evidence, circumstantial information. And consequently, you're going to reach your own conclusions. But Tony Babilinski fills in what the Senate report did not have. And of course, again, Senate's done nothing under either Democrats or Republicans. The House of Representatives, their Judiciary Committee, their investigatory committees, government oversight and reform committees done nothing. The Justice Department's done nothing. John Durham up there in Connecticut just resigned as U.S. Attorney. He's done nothing with regard to Russian collusion or anything else. And my colleagues and friends are always amazed when I predict that nothing will happen. They were all telling me something was going to happen. Well, I knew nothing was going to happen because I've been doing this now for over 30 years. And American people have reached the point, again, where we have to enforce the rule of law ourselves, and we have to be fearless in doing it. And just like Tony Babilinski, not worry about the consequences of doing it. We will be attacked. We will be attacked by the left in particular, as Adam Schiff lied about what went on, but you cannot worry about that. And whether you're religious or not, I am. And I believe that the Father and the Son are behind us, just as our founding fathers called on divine providence to deliver them from King George III. That being said, we're going to finish up the Ukrainian and China element of this when we reconvene next Thursday. Those of you who had to come in and out, you can review this. This is recorded, so you'll be able to watch it. You can watch it as many times as you wish, you grand jurors. I respect the views of people who are watching this and will respond to them at freedomwatchusa.org or in my email at leklayman@gmail.com. Jason will do the same at Crowdsource, the truth, but we're trying to keep this grand jury proceeding pure and not to let other influences other than what they hear enter into it. And I also caution the grand jurors, listen to this carefully, rely on your own viewpoint and your own opinion. That's what really counts in the end when you vote on whether to issue a true bill of indictment. Now, in the third grand jury session, grand juries usually meet one day a week, for a certain amount of hours, and they continue on. This is a continuing process. This is not the end of the grand jury process that Freedom Watch is organizing. There are a lot of alleged criminals that we need to get to. I think you know who they are. I don't need to belabor it. And some that we haven't learned about yet. But not just all political. People who are very powerful. If Jeffrey Epstein had been alive, we would have obviously had a grand jury concerning Jerry Epstein and people like that. But we must do our job and we must do it fairly. Now, I'm going to give you a preview because right now the country is under attack. Illegal aliens flooding across the border in the hundreds of thousands, many of them drug dealers, many of them child traffickers, many of them part of a cartel, an illegal cartel. And we have people and children, and our hearts go out to a lot of them, but they're being abused and misused, and they're endangering the American people because many of them have COVID-19. Many of them have strains from Brazil, Central America, the rest of the world, Middle East. Middle Easterners are coming across the border. And we don't know, as I said before, whether the vaccines that are being administered will work in that regard. And I might add, we don't know whether they work at all. We just don't know that yet. The government hasn't revealed, they probably don't have this information as to how long it will last. Some people think the vaccinations only last 3 months. Others say other things. Who knows? We don't know. So this is a significant risk. And I'm going to put before you some criminal charges against Joe Biden for reckless endangerment of the American people and sedition, treason. He's committing treason against the American people and aiding and abetting our most significant adversary, an adversary that wants, frankly, to take over the world and destroy us. And do not in any way, and I'm going to put this information in front of you too, I believe that our government has information that COVID-19 was a bioweapon produced in the Wuhan lab. Freedom Watch has brought 2 lawsuits on that in Dallas, Texas, and in Jerusalem, Israel. We have 3 experts under oath that will swear that this was a bioweapon and other facts. I'm not going to get into that in depth. But I do want to play at this time an interview which President Trump gave to Harris Faulkner of Fox News the other day. He gave that interview after he's made certain statements, they went to a commercial and he never came back because he said his piece. Now, you can listen to interviews by others too, and I'll also play parts of the press conference of Biden next time as well. He's having a press conference as we speak. We can give equal time and you can decide, who you're going to believe or not. In any event, let's, Jason, play this interview. And before we do that, that will conclude the grand jury session of today. And we will come back a week from today at the same time and place, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, broadcast at crowdsourcethetruth.com and at freedomwatchusa.org. You can go into either of those websites and view that. And I just want to say one other thing is that we have to thank Jason Goodman because, Crowdsource the Truth does tell the truth. Jason's a very courageous person. He's very bright. And people like that are needed in this country because we can't pull any punches. We don't have time to pull punches. We don't have time for so-called political correctness. The country is nearly already destroyed by these kinds of people, and we need to hold them accountable. This is the only way that we can do it right now, peacefully and legally. And Freedom Watch will also be having a Third Continental Congress in Philadelphia in May. And I hope that people will be able to watch that. We'll also be broadcasting that, and we're going to discuss what we need to do to form a new government by and for the people, as is our right, as we did on July 4th, 1776, and also to make certain changes to our Constitution. We'll be discussing that with regard to whether government officials have immunity from suit, federal judges, whether we should put into the Constitution an aspect of discrimination on the basis of ideological belief, those kinds of things. That's not part of this grand jury, but I want to let people understand that, and we're going to do it in a nonpartisan way. So Jason, play this interview with Harris Faulkner, President Trump, and this will conclude the grand jury for today. I'll just have some final remarks.
And just briefly, Larry, before I run that interview, I do want to thank you. It's been my distinct pleasure and honor to spend this week working with you at the Freedom Watch offices and your team there. I want to make sure that our viewers know that they can support your efforts by going to freedomwatchusa.org. And it's very important that people donate. Their financial contributions are tax deductible, and Larry and his team cannot carry out these kind of efforts without your financial support. It's to take a lot of work to put this together, lots of expenses associated. So I want to thank you, Larry, and I want to thank everybody who supports Freedom Watch for making this possible. And let me just...
Thank you, Jay.
My pleasure, Larry. And we'll bring up this interview here and come back right after that.
Me?
Yes, I am.
Let's start with why you are calling this a national disaster.
Well, they're destroying our country. As the gentleman said, the violence in his country. Well, we're bringing the violence to our country because many of the people coming are not nonviolent people. They're violent people. Many of the people coming. These countries don't send out their finest. And in some cases, I'm sure you have wonderful, fine people, but you also have criminals. You have murderers. You have sex traffickers. You have a lot of very bad people coming into our country, and they're doing nothing about it. They're going to be released, or they're already being released. Yesterday, they announced that they're just going to let them go into the country. No courts, no nothing. It's crazy. They're destroying our country. This is just like with the vaccine, where they say, oh, let's blame Trump. We had record numbers, record positive numbers. And frankly, in another couple of weeks, we could have finished up the wall, but they ended construction. And the only reason it didn't get finished, it took me 2.5 years to win the 11 lawsuits that we had, many of them by the Democrats in Congress. So, I mean, the wall is incredible how it's worked. In the large sections, we have almost 500 miles built. And the large sections where you have it, where you don't have an entry point, it's been incredible. Where you have an entry point now, all they have to do is put guards there. But those points get closed up over a short period of time. They just were open to bring all of the equipment and everything back into the United States because, frankly, would rather not leave it in Mexico.
You know, what you're talking about makes me wonder how in the world you close the border. I mean, when I heard DHS Secretary Mayorkas say that, I kind of sat back in my seat and I said, well, but you have all of these gaps. We've been showing them, McAllen, Texas, and other areas. So can you really close the border? What is that like?
Very easily. It's just little sections. And then some sections you want to open because that's an entry point. That's where you have your security, because you do take people in. You have people coming in, helping the farmers. They've been coming in for years. If we ever stopped that with our farmers, frankly, the farmers would go out of business in California, wine country, various other places. So you take them in. But what happens is you do have some open points, because obviously we have people coming back and forth. But you also have, in some cases, areas which weren't completed, like gate areas and other areas, which would have been completed very quickly. You could have had it done in a month. And these are contractors that have been largely paid for the work to get it done. And now they're going to want money not to get it done. They'll ask for more money not to do it. They're professionals, okay? That's what they do. They're contractors. And it's a shame. But, you know, I heard him. He must be incompetent, because we had unbelievable numbers, and we're going to have numbers like nobody's had once the rest of the world was closed up. Oh, it's going to be many, many times worse. It's only going to get worse. And, you know, they like to blame the previous administration, just like they said, oh, no, we didn't produce the vaccine. They produced the vaccine, yet Biden got his shot in December. Yes. You know, they produced the vaccine. They didn't produce anything. All they did is take our policy, and our policy was incredible. Warp Speed, Operation Warp Speed was incredible. And all they did was take our policy. But, you know, they're saying, oh, they did the vaccine. They didn't do the vaccine. I did the vaccine. By pushing the FDA. It would have taken 5 years. You probably would have never had a vaccine, but it would have taken 5 years to get it approved. I got it done in 9 months. And we have not only a vaccine, but a vaccine that really works well. And we have, by the way, we have many vaccines. We have now 4 companies that have them. And that's only because of the Trump administration. It has nothing to do with the mess you're watching now that are destroying our country and taking away freedom of speech and taking away people's rights.
You know, I want to get to this because it's just happened now, and I want to double check this with our producers. The DHS Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, has resigned, Mr. President.
Well, I'm not surprised. Good. That's a big victory for our country.
Hold on. Let me stop. Let me listen to my team one more time. Forgive me. That has not happened. But and I apologize, listening to the team and you.
Cross off
but
that victory.
I know that you. Right. Well, and I want to tell everybody, you issued a statement last night, and you called for that, though. And you're just talking about him, just to clarify, and as somebody who you feel is not competent to handle what's going on. So let me clean up on aisle 7 with my error. He has not resigned, and let me move right to what you are calling for, and others too, for him to move out of the way and possibly get somebody who can do the job. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that'll eventually happen. I think that he's way over his head. All he had to do is sit down in his chair. The systems were taking care of themselves. We had great people there. A lot of those people were removed. The policies were removed. We had to stay in Mexico because what happened is hundreds of thousands of people were coming into our country. Our laws were so bad. We had to change. We had to get things changed, rules, regulations, laws. What we went through was incredible over a 2-year period, especially the first 2 years. And then we got it, and it was so beautiful. I mean, you look at the numbers, it was so beautiful. And then they came in, and I think just because we did such a good job and because it was me, they went, let's go the opposite. Let's let everybody come into the country. And now, I mean, it was just announced they're allowing everybody to walk through and just come in, and they're not taking anything. They have no information about the people. And that's the people they know about. How about the people they don't know about? All those thousands of people that are coming in with there's absolutely no protection. And the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal, and ICE, who are phenomenal, they're taking care of children now. They're like babysitters right now. They've been taking off their jobs, standing at the wall. And Mexico's no longer protecting us. I had 28,000 soldiers, compliments of Mexico, protecting our country. Because I said, if you don't put them there, we're going to charge you tariffs on your products that you sell into the United States and make a fortune. That's the only reason we had them. So we had great numbers. All they had to do is continue our policies. And even, look, we won the election as far as I'm concerned. We had a great election. We got almost 75 million votes, but we were going to make it even more stringent with the understanding that we want people to come into our country, but they have to come in legally. Very simple.
So let me ask you this. I want to get back a moment and revisit the COVID-19, because that, you ran on very strongly on the border. That was a single issue for you. The pandemic hadn't happened. Biden ran strongly on COVID-19. Yet I'm learning from Chad Wolf, your former acting DHS secretary, and Democrats as well, that people are crossing the border, and sometimes we can test them and sometimes we can't. So as a former president, you know a lot of details that we don't have access right now to, because we haven't had our first solo news conference with Biden. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions just from a president's perspective. Title 42. What would it do to stem the tide in terms of COVID-19 right now? And is it being applied in your estimation? You created that.
They're applying nothing. They're not doing Title 42 or any title. People are just pouring into our country, and they will destroy our country. They will destroy our country. You can't take millions of people. They'll have millions of people before this mess is over. And they've got some kind of a political theory, I guess, that it's a good thing. Maybe. I don't think it is. I think it's a very bad thing for our country. Again, we want people to come in, but they have to be able to help our country. They have to come in through merit, and they have to come in legally. Right now, you don't have anything protecting our country. You have people just flowing through, coming through. And they're the numbers are so vast. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. They said 20 years. I'll bet you it's maybe forever. Maybe it's, from the beginning of this whole mess. But it's much more than 20 years. They said the worst in 20 years. No, they're going to destroy our country in other ways, too, if you look at what's going on. You're going to have packed the court.
Well, Montana,
you're going to have big tax increases. They're going to take your guns away. I mean, take a look at what they're doing with take a look at what's coming up, and I predicted it all. Now, I must say, I never thought that Biden, and it's not Biden, it's other people that are, putting stuff in front of him.
You don't think it's him?
But I never thought that Biden in a million years would be worse. Nobody did. Would be far worse than Bernie Sanders. This is Bernie Sanders on steroids. This is what he's doing with all, and you haven't seen anything yet. So the Second Amendment is going to be obliterated. And there's no stopping them. And our leadership, Mitch isn't strong enough to stop people. Never was. That's like one of the big secrets. But he had the majority. But now that he's not in the majority, he's not doing his thing. He's not doing what he should be doing. There are ways to stop some of this stuff that's happening, but you're going to see packing the courts. You're going to see the biggest tax increase in history. You're going to see the Second Amendment just absolutely obliterated. You're going to see many other things. The Green New Deal will be put into effect. And people used to laugh at it when it was proposed 3 years ago by people that knew nothing about the environment, by the way. And they're going to raise taxes to a level, and they're going to spend a lot of the money foolishly on Green New Deal stuff that doesn't work.
I want to ask my team to put up a couple of numbers, and we're showing some information for our viewers, Mr. President, as you were talking and matching up a little bit. You were talking about the surge at the border. Let's go back to southwest border. Adults up 188%. And unaccompanied minors, I want to talk about the children, because that's the mark against our soul. And your administration took criticism because we were taking in unaccompanied minors, and they were getting separated from the adults at the border. And you see that, everybody on the screen, 92% increase of unaccompanied minors now in 2021 versus 2020. We're only 3 months in. So as we look at the screen, I want to match that now. Mr. President, when you look at these numbers and you look at what wiped away on the first day of President Biden's administration, an executive order, what exactly were you doing that was working better than what we see now? And I understand that people were flowing over now, but there were some things that you did. You had agreements with Honduras, Ecuador, Guatemala, right, Mexico. I want the audience to understand some of what was wiped away more than just, well, it had my name on it, because those numbers that we're looking at now are a mark against us. Those children, their lives are forever different. if they make it.
Well, first of all, I mean, the only problem with giving you this answer is you don't have enough time because, you need about 2 hours to explain what we've done. What we did is incredible. But, in a nutshell, I do want to start off by saying that they built the cages. They built cages for children. We didn't build them. They built them. And a famous picture appeared about the cages that were built. And then fortunately, somebody remembered. And fortunately, we have guys like Morgan and Tom. How good. I mean, we have such professionals, Tom Homan. We have such great professionals. I watch them on your show. They really know their business. And they're not involved in this. They have people that have no idea. But they built cages in 2014, but that was during the Obama administration, and they blamed them on us. We didn't build the cages. They did. Very sad, where they had a picture in the New York Times of children in cages, and it turned out that it was them, and the newspapers didn't want to do retractions, even though now everybody knows that's the fact. But as far as other countries are concerned, so we had Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and others. We were paying those three countries approximately $500 million a year. Who knows what they were doing with the money? You could imagine. They were supposed to use that money for economic development, keep people there. It all sounds good, but it wasn't being used for that. And people were flowing in, and they wouldn't take MS-13 gang members back. They wouldn't take anybody back for Obama. They wouldn't do it. They said, nope, don't ever land your plane here. Don't ever bring your buses here. Don't ever send a boat. Nothing. We won't take them back. Turn around. They were turning our people around. They were treating us like amateurs, which is what they were. And so I said, well, they was doing that at the beginning of mine too. I said, so how much money do we pay these countries? $500 million. I said, stop payment. As soon as I stopped payment, all of a sudden they said, we would welcome our MS-13 gang members back into our country. We would welcome. Anyway, I got along very well with those three countries and really well with Mexico. The president of Mexico is a friend of mine. He's a great guy.
Excuse me, because I know I'm going to have to let you go soon, but I want to get this in there. Is that part of what's gone? I mean, is Biden maintaining these relationships? We can't do this without the countries south of the border. In fact, we had some video, and we can go back to Tijuana, Mexico. There are tent cities that have set up on the border waiting to get back into the United States.
Yeah.
Waiting
all
to
those people are going to come flooding in. Right. I kept them in Mexico. By keeping them in Mexico, Mexico becomes much tougher at their northern border because they don't want any more. So I said to Mexico, look, if you're going to do any of this stuff that's bad for us, I'm going to put tariffs on all of the cars that you make for the United States, because before my administration, they stole 32% of our automaking business. The unions don't realize that. The union members realize it, but the heads of the unions that all support Democrats, no matter who they are, they don't realize it. But they took 32% of our automobile business. I said, all those cars that you make are going to be tariffed. So Mexico was great. I must tell you, Mexico was great. The relationships
I developed were great.
Well, no,
we can tell that they're not doing that.
They have a field day. They have people that are rank amateurs. They have people that talk about ideology, but it's not even good ideology. Why would it work? Why are we supposed to take care of the world, and in many cases, the world's criminals? And they're coming over not from the three countries plus Mexico. They're coming over now from Yemen. They're coming over from the Middle East. Who the hell knows what we're taking in? These people are destroying our country. I said it was going to happen during the campaign. That's why I got 75 million votes, probably much more than that. And it's a disgrace what's been allowed to happen to our country, and they're persecuting people. They're stopping them from talking. They're stopping free speech, and they're persecuting
let's get into that.
Great Americans.
Let's get into that. Now, let's get into the fact that as media, we cannot get into this border situation, that there is a lid on us with regard to those facilities. Did your administration ever consider some of the things that the Biden administration is doing, closing down a border? I still don't understand, by the way, Mr. President, how that would even really work if it's so porous the way it is. You can't close it.
Well, that's why you needed the wall. But now I built almost 500 miles of wall. So it's a much easier situation now. When I took it over, it was a disaster. But I built 500 miles of wall, and now You have vast sections. I mean, you see some openings, but the openings get closed. That's what the purpose is. You have to close them. Those contracts have been given a long time ago. And again, that was to get people through. But these are small openings. But that has to get closed. But the wall has made it so much easier for these people. And frankly, I mean, I even hear they want to tear down the wall, if you can even believe it. Tear down the wall. This is not the way you heard it from Ronald Reagan. This is not a wall that should be torn down. This wall has made a tremendous difference of stopping sex traffickers, human traffickers, drug dealers, drugs. Drugs were way down under my administration that last year. Because we had the wall, we had 28,000 Mexican soldiers guarding for free. Zero. We paid nothing.
Commercial break.
By the way, we paid nothing.
Will you stay with me through the commercial if we have to take it? My team's going to let me know I don't need to cut in.
Only because it's you. I will.
Well, thank you. I know we have so much to cover here. This topic of the border is so wide. Sure. So I want to scoot to the transparency and where you think we are with transparency, not just on this issue, but overall with this current president. 64 days on Thursday it will have been by the time we see a solo news conference. And as you can imagine, this will be a big part of the questioning. I mean, the media already started this weekend. I mean, they had to catch up to Fox on this, obviously, and some others. It took you 27 days, Obama 20. The second most with time was G.W. Bush, former president, Clinton 9 days, but 64 days it will have been on Thursday. And you can bet people are going to want to know about the border situation. What do you say about the transparency with the current administration?
Well, there is none. There is none. And, I guess you're supposed to have a press conference on Thursday, but the questions will all be softballs. I've watched the interviews. I like George Stephanopoulos, but I watched those couple of interviews, and it was a joke. It was just like a softball. Anybody could answer them, and yet he almost couldn't answer them, to be honest with you, so you know that. So it'll be interesting. I hear the questions are all vetted. You don't have the same people in there. I mean, you might have the same people, but it's a whole different set of questions. It's ridiculous, the questions that are asked. What did you have for dinner? What kind of ice cream do you have as he walks out? I mean, they never talk to me that way, and that's okay. I had a lot of press conferences. I enjoyed press conferences because you get the word out. It's the only way to get an honest word out, because the press is really not a free press. The press is not a free press in our country. Okay, so the way you get the press out is with press conferences. Now, he doesn't need them because the press protects him totally. I mean, anybody else, if that were me that hasn't had a press conference for as long, for the number of, with all the things going on, especially at the border, but really you have things as big as the border. We're not going to be energy independent within 3 months. I mean, think of that. I worked so hard. First time ever, we were energy independent. We didn't need Russia. We didn't need the Middle East. We didn't need anybody. We were energy independent.
This undoes all of
now it's being thrown away. And all those countries, by the way, including Ukraine, where his son has an interest, big interest, are going to make a fortune. They're going to make a fortune. And look at the way gasoline prices are going up at the pump. Harris, look at the gasoline prices, how they're going up at the pump.
And again, these are all things that if you had a traditional news conference a few weeks ago, we wouldn't be playing catch up on this. I don't know that you can get all of this done on Thursday. And, when he was asked about the president of the United States there, we see video on the screen, Joe Biden, he was asked about going to the border, because I want to toggle back just a little bit, and the gag order that's on all of us there. When he was asked whether or not he would go, he said, at some point, you've been to the border, Mr. Trump, and you know that when you go, or the first lady goes, as she did, Melania Trump, when you go to the border, you bring a different level of attention to whatever is going on down there. Democrats are not calling this a crisis, yet they sent in FEMA and HHS. So I want to talk with you about the transparency specifically with this issue. Should border agents be able to talk with us openly? I mean, our Griff Jenkins had to really get in there and follow some because we can't even do ride-alongs right now. What are your thoughts about what likely is going on behind the scenes that we can't see? That's a lot of questions, so I'll just let you go at it.
Well, I let the Border Patrol speak, as you know. I spoke a lot. I went to the border, and I went to the border also to learn, because as an example, I was going to build a precast concrete wall with nothing, you can't see through it, and I went with the Border Patrol, and they had a specific wall. They wanted it steel. They wanted concrete insets. They wanted rebar. They wanted different things, and they needed vision. They had to have great vision through the wall. I wouldn't have built the wall we had. I would have built a different wall, and frankly, it would have been less expensive, and it would have gone up in many ways easier, but it wouldn't have been as good. This one has everything, all the bells and whistles, all of the tremendous security, wiring. It's all wired for various forms of security and drones and everything you could possibly have. So I learned, from being there. If I didn't talk to them, I would have had something that would not have worked like this one is working. So, you have to go there. This is a major problem, and it shows a level of dishonesty. So they'll say something like, we did the vaccine, not Trump. Okay. And we have to respond to that. Then they'll say the same thing here. Oh, it was Trump's fault. And we had record good numbers. And this is not 20 years, as I said before. This is many, many years. It's never been like this. Nobody's ever seen anything like what's happening now. But I also said before, wait till you see what happens, because it's going to get worse. Look at the numbers of people that are heading up here. Harris, look at the numbers of people.
No, it's true. And they have now officially done what they think they can do. There's more to come. We don't know what that will look like. Before I let you go, just real quickly, most presidents, ex-presidents like yourself, do not weigh in at this level. Why did you feel like you needed to on this issue?
Well, you called me. I didn't call you, in all fairness. But the reason I weigh in is very simple.
You wrote the statement last night. It was pretty strong.
I wrote a statement. I put out a statement. But the reason I weigh in is very simple. They're destroying our country. Very simple. It can't get simpler than that. They are destroying our country, and they're going to destroy it with tax increases, the likes of which nobody has ever seen before, in order to accomplish the Green New Deal nonsense. They're destroying it with woke. When China looks at woke and they see the biggest problem we have is Dr. Seuss, in the meantime, they're building factories and trying to kill us in so many different ways. They laugh at us. They think we're so... Frankly, they think our country is stupid when they look at this, when our competitors look at what's going on in our country, taking down the statues to great heroes and so many other things. Now, I do it because I want to do what's right, and they are destroying our country.
Mr. President, the 45th President of the United States, and we did call you, and we're glad you did. And we now have more information than we had on some of the issues with your border policies as well, and thankful for your time. Good to see you.
Thank you very much, Harris. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
There you go, Larry.
Well, there you have it. We'll be getting to the whole border crisis issue right after we finish up with China and Ukraine. Countries in a crisis. We are taking our legal system back. We will reconvene a week from today at the same time. We've gone exactly 3 hours. We started a little late. Typical Zoom problems. By the way, Zoom was created by China, so maybe they're watching carefully. So thank you for participating, members of the grand jury. We leave this grand jury open. It is not closed. It's just beginning, and we will bring about justice in short order. We appreciate everything, and we appreciate the people who are watching out there at freedomwatchusa.org and crowdsource the truth. Tune in each week. Tell your friends about it. Watch. See what the American people can do with the grace of God, with the divine providence of the Father and Son. We will save this country, and we will bring it back from having been basically destroyed. The president was right. And then we need to do it now before it's too late. Thank you, and God bless. Thank you.